Chapter 40, Don't Be Like a Child. After temporarily bidding farewell to Liao, I returned to the attic. Opening the door, I found Robin sitting on the rooftop, cradling his guitar, though not practicing. Scattered beer cans lay around him, giving him a somewhat desolate look. I handed him a cigarette and vaulted onto the railing, lighting it up and listening to the rain pattering on the canopy. The sound was like a sorrowful lament, soaking the night as it waited for dawn. "Why so down again?" I asked with a chuckle. Robin tore open a beer can and handed it to me, as if our night consisted solely of cigarettes and beer. "Every day is the same," he replied. "Well, you stay that way. I've decided to be an optimistic man." "Really? Don't just talk the talk." Despite Robin's jest, I didn't mind. Smiling, I responded, "I'll talk, and I'll walk." Pausing, I added seriously, "It's been over 3 years since graduation, and I've achieved nothing. Watching classmates and friends get married and move forward makes me feel empty." Robin nodded silently, tossing his empty beer can and taking a deep drag from his cigarette. I stood up from the railing and shouted to the vast, night-shrouded city below, "I'm done messing around. I'm going to work hard, buy a house, marry a beautiful girl, have someone to talk to and sleep next to every night." Robin suddenly strummed his guitar, humming a tune of "Don't Be Silly." Only then did I realize how sarcastic he could be. The next day, I arrived early at the company. Liao also came to meet with a marketing manager from Gucci. The manager praised her image and temperament, aligning perfectly with Gucci's product positioning. Despite her carefree demeanor among friends, Liao exuded a sophisticated and avant-garde aura at work, with a touch of mixed-race beauty. Gucci's choice to feature Liao in their promotional campaign wasn't merely a test of our collaboration but a testament to her suitability, highlighting the meticulous nature of international brands. As Liao shot the promotional posters for Gucci, their vice president for China signed a contract to establish their presence in our department store. The signing ceremony was grand, attracting significant media attention, and allowed our company to announce its entry into the ranks of top-tier department stores. This high-profile signing ceremony was a prelude to the comprehensive marketing campaign I was about to lead, marking my first real professional challenge as Gucci set up shop in our store. That evening, our company hosted a banquet for Gucci's Chinese VP and his entourage. As one of the key contributors, I was invited, feeling a bit overwhelmed by the honor. Having worked at the grassroots level for 2 years, I had rarely interacted with the top executives, let alone dined with them. During the banquet, Shen Jingming praised me highly in front of the senior executives. By the end of the evening, our executive vice president, Li Junren, personally approached me, patting my shoulder, and said, "Young man, I'll remember you." Of course, being remembered is one thing, earning genuine respect from the higher-ups requires seizing this rare opportunity and excelling in the marketing campaign to create value for the company. After the celebratory banquet, I went to find Liao. Having completed her Gucci shoot, she would leave Suzhou for Hengdian the next day to continue pursuing her acting career. We sat by a stretch of railway, the tracks extending infinitely into the night's wind, seemingly free but destined for an endpoint. An old green train, carrying a group of lonely-looking passengers, rushed past, leaving only fleeting lights and echoes behind. Liao, dressed warmly, sat beside me, a slight distance between us, making us feel more like friends. I tucked in my coat, lit a cigarette, and said, "Don't let others bully you when you're back on set." Hugging her knees, Liao stared at another passing train, eventually nodding and saying, "You work hard too." "Actually, I feel guilty. My troubles have caused you so much grief. I've often thought about confronting that actress who bullied you." Liao smiled and said, "Don't be like a child. I don't want to dwell on it anymore." "What are you thinking about?" "Nothing. Thinking too much only brings sadness." I agreed with her, though I wondered if she could truly let go. At least, I often found myself entangled in thoughts, feeling increasingly pained. After a long silence, I handed Liao an envelope from my bag. "This is your pay, 10,000 in total. Please count it." "Why so much?" "Our manager said if you could make time for the shoot, he'd personally triple the payment." "You deserve it." I insisted, pushing the envelope towards her. Liao accepted it, tucking it into her handbag. We remained silent until we parted, watching numerous trains roar by. On the way back, just past 10, I realized Robin hadn't gone to the bar. From inside the apartment came the sound of a woman's moans, perhaps Lily from before, or someone else. Unwilling to intrude but with nowhere else to go, I sat downstairs for a while. I then remembered I'd promised Mitsai to deal with the cockroach corpses in her old place, so I decided to handle it now. I called Mitsai, who told me she was still staying at Luyuan Jingyuan, waiting for the infestation to be cleared. I told her I was available, and she said she was too. So, from opposite sides of the city, we headed towards that old house. Chapter 41, Shameless. In the cover of night, I returned to the apartment complex where I had lived for over 2 years. Mikai's maroon Q7 was already parked downstairs, indicating she had arrived before me. Whistling as I ascended the stairs, the motion sensor lights flickered on, casting a harsh glow on the dilapidated hallway. The state of the building always puzzled me, why Mikai chose to live here, forcing me to take refuge in Robin's den of vice. Knocking on the door, Mikai, fully dressed, let me in. I immediately grumbled, I'm exhausted. Then hurry up and finish the job so you can rest, she replied in a concerned tone. I gave her a dissatisfied look and said, you're beautiful, but your emotional intelligence could use some work. When I say I'm tired, it means I want you to make me some hot tea. I haven't stayed here for days. There's no hot water. There's an electric kettle and a gas stove. If there's no hot water, boil some. And I want goji lemon tea. I left the goji berries and lemons behind when I moved. Make it now. I sat on the sofa, crossing my legs and helping myself to a tangerine from the fruit bowl. Mikai's face darkened, but she went to the kitchen, plugged in the kettle, and stood facing me with a resentful look. I felt triumphant. If I didn't take advantage now, she'd use me and then lash out with venomous words. These tangerines are great. Where did you buy them? I said, peeling another. If you like them, take them with you. But can you handle the main task first? I replied leisurely, last time, I liked your cherries and you let me take them. Now I like these tangerines. Can I take everything I like from this place? In principle, yes. With someone as thick-skinned as you, there's no point arguing, she said patiently. I smiled and continued, well, I like you. Why don't you come with me tonight? Her face turned stormy as she glared at me. Don't you dare say things to me that you can say to any woman. It makes you seem shameless. I responded calmly, I was just following your logic. If you don't like it, then I won't like you. Mikai glanced at the nearly boiling water, her expression suggesting she wished she could stuff me into the kettle. I was elated. For the first time in our countless verbal battles, I had the upper hand. This sense of reclaiming lost ground was intoxicating, and I couldn't help but hum Fei Wong's new tenant. Waiting for the night, welcoming the day, cleaning in the day, praying at night, leaving the hustle, seeking troubles, from the ends of the earth, whims of the moment. Is anyone there? Anyone looking for me? I say hello, you say bother, neither late nor early, miles apart. Mikai glared at me but said nothing, helpless because she couldn't be as shameless as I was. Do you know what song I just sang? I asked. Before Mikai could answer, I continued, it's Fei Wong's new tenant. Don't you think the lyrics describe our relationship perfectly? Without waiting for her response, I analyzed, every day, I wait here, cleaning in the day, praying at night. One day, you whimsically moved Aini, the landlord, said hello to you, but you said I was a bother. Then you kicked me out of this place. Mikai sighed, you have quite the imagination. This isn't imagination. It's a real, tragic story that happened not long ago. I stood up from the sofa, glaring at her with exaggerated indignation. Ignoring my outburst, Mikai said, where are the lemon slices and goji berries? Next to the toilet in the bathroom. I replied spitefully, wanting to disgust her. Reflecting on my plight, I felt a deep sense of grievance. Mikai looked disgusted but realized I was being deliberate. Forget it. You make your own tea, she said coldly. You're so principled. You promised to make tea, so you will, I taunted. Exasperated, Mikai finally snapped, did you really put the lemon and goji berries next to the toilet? Ask the cockroaches in the bathroom. They live there, so they'll know. Furious, Mikai said, forget it, and retreated to her room, refusing to speak further. Feeling victorious, I sang new tenant again at her door. Eventually, I found the goji berries and lemons in my old room, made a cup of tea, and sat back on the sofa, savoring the moment. After finishing my tea, I went to the bathroom to clean up the cockroach corpses. There weren't many since the pesticide hadn't worked well. I finally found one half-dead cockroach behind the toilet, enough to justify my efforts. Wrapping the cockroach in tissue, I added some cigarette butts for effect and went to Mikai's door. Knocking, I said, "I've cleaned up the cockroach corpses. They're wrapped in tissue. You want to check? That pesticide really works wonders." Chapter 42, Call the Police If You Dare. Mitsai in the room did not respond to me, likely infuriated by my previous words and actions. I knocked on the door again and said, "I won't enter your room. I'll just throw the disposed cockroach inside for you to verify, proving that I genuinely helped you and have never shirked my responsibilities." In a tense tone, Mitsai replied, "No need to verify. Just take it away quickly." "Alright," I responded, tossing the cigarette butt and the half-dead cockroach wrapped in tissue paper out of the window. I then informed Mitsai, "The bathroom is now usable, completely free of cockroaches." "Okay, then you should go rest. It's quite late, and finding a cab now would be difficult." Mitsai finally emerged from the room, her slightly curly long hair now tied up, wearing a thicker houndstooth woolen coat and holding car keys. She said, "I'll drive you back then." I stood still, intending to linger since I had promised Lily I wouldn't return to Robin's place tonight. At the door, Mitsai turned back and asked, "Why aren't you leaving?" I sighed and replied helplessly, "I can't stay at my friend's place tonight." "Why not?" "He brought a woman back for the night," I murmured, my voice laden with a sense of desolation. "It's been a week already, and you still haven't found a place to stay?" "I've been busy lately, making 2 trips to Hangdian. How could I find time to look for a place? Besides, finding a comfortable home isn't that easy." I spoke, casting a nostalgic glance around the room. "Then go stay at a hotel." "No, hotels are too expensive. I need to save money to repay the debt I owe you." Saying this, I plopped down on the sofa, lying down to make it clear I intended to stay. Mitsai returned to my side, frowning, and asked, "What do you mean by this?" "It means I'm staying here tonight," I replied with a smile. After a moment, Mitsai, holding back her frustration, said, "Please don't make me think of you as a freeloader, alright? I am a freeloader. Besides, I spent over 20 on a cab to help you tonight, and I haven't even mentioned money. What's wrong with letting me stay here for a night? I'll reimburse your cab fare and book you a hotel room. Is that acceptable?" I sprang up from the sofa, almost face to face with Mitsai, and shouted, "I can't stand how you think money can solve everything. Do you think I'm someone who's short of money? Let me tell you, I'm not leaving tonight. Call the police if you dare. Say I broke into your place. How can you, a tenant, call the police on me, your landlord? You won't, because you used your money to forcefully take over the place I've lived in for over 2 years. You're the one at fault here." I rambled on, blocking any retort from Mitsai. She simply glared at me, while I lay back on the sofa, resolute in not leaving. Mitsai, exasperated, stomped her foot, a rare loss of composure for her, and stormed out with her handbag. "Where are you going?" I called after her. "I'm leaving, alright? Go ahead, don't come back." After Mitsai left, I sneaked into her room, found a set of unused bedding, moved it to my old room, made the bed, and settled in comfortably. I actually hoped she wouldn't return, completely forgetting how I had once left this place with a self-righteous air to make way for Mitsai. The next morning, I got up at 8, hurriedly used Mitsai's toiletries, grabbed a quick breakfast at a familiar snack shop downstairs, and rushed to catch the bus to the company. After the routine morning meeting at the company, manager Chen Jingming kept me back, clearly concerned about the comprehensive marketing plan I was in charge of. Chen Jingming asked, "So, have you formulated any ideas for this comprehensive marketing plan?" I nodded, "Yes, I plan to focus on realizing customer value at the core of the plan. This approach aims to strengthen our brand image. I believe that by realizing customer value first, customers will better help us achieve corporate value." "Your approach is sound." Polari Department Store has been in business for many years, and our 4Ps, product, price, place, promotion, are already mature as we officially enter the top-tier department store league. Enhancing our image is crucial. Elevating customer value is the best way to enhance our corporate image. Your marketing strategy aligns well with our current strategic needs. I nodded in response. Having worked at Polari Department Store for over 2 years, I naturally had my own understanding of the company's strategic environment. Chen Jingming continued, "I will assign one person each from the graphic design team, engineering team, and display design team to join this special project group and assist you in completing this marketing plan. If you have any specific requirements for the personnel, feel free to discuss them with me." "Understood." By the way, I've heard that our biggest competitor, Zor Market Shopping Center, plans to hold a large-scale promotional event soon. Their goal is to deplete consumer demand in the short term, thereby suppressing us. Zor Market Shopping Center's upcoming promotional event didn't surprise me. It was a strategic necessity. Polari and Zor Market are in the same commercial circle, both targeting the high-end market, leading to intense competition. With Gucci setting up a counter in our store, we are now truly parallel with them, which they naturally see as a threat. Thus, they are taking strong measures to suppress us. Although Polari has reached the top-tier department store standard, we still lag behind Zor Market in some respects, especially as they host 11 top international brands, slightly more than we do. I asked Chen Jingming, so, should our marketing department prepare a counter-promotion plan soon? Yes, and it needs to be quick. Our promotional event must precede theirs to disrupt Zor Market's strategy. Although time is tight, we must ensure the event's effectiveness. This is a test of our department's agility and execution. We can't afford to fail. Pausing, Chen Jingming added, due to the significance of this promotional plan, I've called Fang Yuan back from her honeymoon early. She'll report to the company tomorrow and join you in completing this promotional plan. I breathed a sigh of relief. Without Fang Yuan, I couldn't manage such an important project alone. This also highlighted the strategic importance of this promotional plan for our department store, otherwise, Chen Jingming wouldn't have ended Fang Yuan's honeymoon early. Chen Jingming then handed me a document from his drawer. This is the latest personnel file from Zor Market Shopping Center, obtained by our PR department. Their senior management has undergone significant changes recently. You should review this document, particularly the composition of their marketing team, to understand our competitor better. I flipped through the personnel file handed to me by Chen Jingming. The moment I saw the first page, I was shocked, as the newly appointed CEO of Zor Market Shopping Center was someone I knew all too well. Chapter 43, Fated Encounters. The new CEO of Zhuomei Shopping Center, Mi Kai, English name Betsy, born September 10, 1988, in Suzhou, holds an MBA from the University of Pennsylvania. As I read her resume, my astonishment knew no bounds. The very woman I had driven out of that dilapidated room last night was now the newly appointed CEO of Zhuomei Shopping Center. Though I didn't work at Zhuomei, it was our fiercest competitor at Boli Department Store, creating a significant indirect connection between Mi Kai and me. It seemed the saying enemies are bound to meet held true, as our lives intertwined both personally and professionally. Noticing my unease, Chen Jingming asked, "Is there a problem with Zhuomei's personnel file?" No problem. It's just that Zhuomei's new CEO is extraordinarily beautiful, only 26. I wonder if she has a boyfriend. Chen Jingming looked at me helplessly, speechless for a moment. Manager, I'll get back to work, I said, leaving his office with Zhuomei's personnel file in hand. Back in my office, I reviewed the file again, particularly Mi Kai's page, still finding it unbelievable. Comparing myself to her, I felt an overwhelming sense of disparity. Zhuomei had been outpacing us in Suzhou for years, and Mi Kai, as their CEO, was superior even to our own CEO, Yang Huaqing. In my over 2 years at Boli, I had hardly seen Yang Huaqing, a figure I regarded with great reverence. Yet recently, I had treated Mi Kai, a more distinguished professional in our field, with such disrespect. I vividly remembered throwing her bedding out the window into the rain, reducing her to tears. Our subsequent interactions had been equally marred by my misconduct. I couldn't think any further. At that moment, I was truly grateful I worked at Boli, not Zhuomei. Zhao Li, noticing my shifting expressions, asked, "Zhao Yang, why do you look so twisted?" "My face hurts." "Oh, what's that you're reading?" "You've been at it for a while. It's Zhuomei's latest personnel file. Take a look." I tossed the file to Zhao Li. He scanned the first page and exclaimed, "Zhuomei has a new CEO." "Yeah. Only 26 and so pretty. Could she be just a figurehead? Do you think she's just a pretty face?" I said, feeling an inexplicable bitterness. How could someone my age live like a fairy while I felt like a cockroach? But she's an MBA from the University of Pennsylvania. Their business school is top-notch, globally, Zhao Li remarked, looking at Mi Kai's photo again. I glared at him. "Zhao Li, do you have any principles? An MBA doesn't equate to business acumen. Modern commercial competition is about wisdom and experience, not degrees. Why so agitated?" "I was just saying. It doesn't really concern us little people. Idiot, don't talk to me. I'm not an idiot. I'm a genuine man who loves outdoor sports, Zhao Li retorted, blushing. Outdoor ballet, maybe. Zhao Yang, you're insufferable. You're mean in actions and words. I responded indifferently, keep insulting, go on, with your pinky extended. Zhao Li. That evening, I stayed 2 extra hours at the office with colleagues, adjusting to this new, hectic work pace, a significant shift from my previously disheveled life. As I was leaving, I got a call from Fang Yuan, who had just returned from Sanya with Yen Yen. They invited me to dinner. Wary, I asked if Jianwei would be there, and Fang Yuan assured me she was in Nanjing with Xiang Chen. Only then did I feel at ease, though tinged with a vague sense of loss. I knew the implications of Jianwei and Xiang Chen returning to Nanjing. The oppressive night magnified my melancholy as I arrived at the restaurant. I smoked a cigarette, scrutinized my reflection in the window, and, satisfied with my facade, extinguished the cigarette and went inside. Yen Yen waved at me from afar, forcing a smile. I walked over to them. As I sat down, Yen Yen handed me a bag. Knowing you love beer, I bought lots of ready-to-eat seafood for you. Zhao Yang, isn't your big sister kind? Accepting the bag, I joked, you're a married woman now, don't act young and call yourself my sister. I can't say it. Yen Yen playfully slapped me. So what if I'm married? I'm still your sister. I laughed heartily, though my heart remained weighed down by an indescribable sadness. In our banter, Fang Yuan asked, Chen manager mentioned Zhuomei's upcoming major promotion targeting Boli. I nodded. Yes, it's expected. Otherwise, Chen Jingning wouldn't have rushed you back, cutting short your honeymoon. Turning to Yen Yen, I asked, annoyed about cutting your trip short? Yen Yen, holding Fang Yuan's arm, said, I support my husband's work. Missing a few days of fun doesn't matter. Good wife, great help. I sincerely praised. Fang Yuan, embracing Yen Yen, smiled at me. You should put some effort into grooming your girlfriend into a great help too. I stayed silent, hoping the waiter would hurry with our food over dinner. Fang Yuan discussed work, and I briefed him on recent developments. Suddenly, he asked, Zhuomei's new CEO, do you have their latest personnel file? Yes, Qin Jingming gave me a copy this morning. Did you bring it? Let me see. I realized Fang Yuan would soon discover that Mi Kai was the new CEO of Zhuomei, a revelation that would shock him. It was hard to explain, as it seemed too incredible. Even in my wildest dreams, I hadn't imagined that the woman I had forced to pretend to be my girlfriend was Zhuomei's new CEO. I don't carry it around for no reason. Then at least summarize Zhuomei's new CEO and their planning department for me. I responded irritably, can we not discuss work after hours? Fang Yuan, serious, said, I take my work seriously. For me, there's no distinction between work hours and off hours. As members of the planning department, it's essential to be aware of our competitors' movements. Realizing it was futile to conceal, I reluctantly pulled the file from my bag and tossed it on the table. Here it is. Fang Yuan picked it up, puzzled. Didn't you say you didn't have it? Don't ask, just read. Chapter 44, Exposed. Fang Yuan, perplexed, opened the personnel files of Zhuomei Shopping Center. His gaze lingered on the first page, and his expression fluctuated wildly, mirroring my own shock when I first saw it. Yen Yen, noticing Fang Yuan's unusual behavior, asked, what's wrong, and looked at the file in his hand. At a glance, she covered her mouth in astonishment and stared at me with wide eyes. After a moment, she exclaimed, oh my god, the CEO of Zhuomei Shopping Center is your girlfriend. This is outrageous. Or am I hallucinating? Fang Yuan put down the file and, with the same incredulous look as Yen Yen, said to me, Zhao Yang, what's going on? You never mentioned that Mi Tsai is the CEO of Zhuomei. I only found out this morning when I saw the personnel file. I felt just like you do now, I thought I was hallucinating. Fang Yuan and Yen Yen exchanged a glance, still shocked, and asked me, how exactly did you meet her? Do you remember I told you my old house was bought by a woman driving a luxury car? Yes, you mentioned it. Well, that woman was Mi Tsai, and that's how we naturally got acquainted. Fang Yuan nodded, suddenly seeming to grasp the crux of the matter. With a piercing gaze, he asked, in less than a month, she became your girlfriend? I attempted to cover it up. When fate arrives, you can't stop it. Zhao Yang, you managed to win over the CEO of Zhuomei in under a month? Even novels don't develop that quickly. Yen Yen chimed in, when you introduced Mitsai to us, we thought you had been dating her for a long time and were just keeping it a secret. We never imagined you hadn't even known her for a month. Jia Yang, your skill in wooing women is unparalleled. Could you two stop speaking to me so sarcastically? I glared at them angrily. In unison, Fang Yuan and Yen Yen demanded, then be honest with us. What exactly is your relationship with Mitsai? In truth, the moment I showed Fang Yuan Mitsai's file, I knew today's facade would crumble. Who would believe that the CEO of a top shopping center would fall for an unreliable junior employee? Blame it on life's absurdity. Why must Mitsai be Zhuomei's CEO? If she were the daughter of a township business owner or emerged from a crack in a rock, I wouldn't be facing this embarrassing exposure. After a long pause, I, impatiently, said to the two who were staring at me intently, fine, I'll come clean. Hurry up, or we'll resort to torture, Yen Yen threatened, shaking her little fist at me. I reclined in my chair, staring at the ceiling, finally confessing, she's not my girlfriend. At your wedding, I felt quite empty, so I called Mitsai, lied about inviting her to dinner, and tricked her into attending your wedding banquet. Then I impulsively told Jianwei she was my girlfriend. After that, I kept lying to cover up the initial lie until everyone believed she was my girlfriend. Oh my god. Jia Yang, does this mean you still can't forget Jianwei? Yen Yen disregarded the crowd in the restaurant and asked me loudly, Fang Yuan, give your wife a tranquilizer, she's too noisy. I said calmly. Fang Yuan gave Yen Yen a look, signaling her to be quiet. She finally looked at me apologetically and fell silent, leaving space for Fang Yuan and me to talk. After a moment of silence, Fang Yuan said to me, Zhao Yang, why deceive yourself with such childish behavior? I smiled, childish? I just wanted to make things easier for myself, Jianwei, and Xiang Chen. At least we could still speak like friends. Fang Yuan sighed and fell silent. The most powerless thing in this world is the comings and goings of love between men and women. No one can save the past between Jianwei and me, and Fang Yuan understood this truth. I also remained silent, filled with helplessness and sorrow. In this deep autumn night, no ship could sail me away from sadness. So, I locked away my desires, swayed my soul, and anxiously looked around. After dinner, I walked alone on the street. Though not utterly despondent, I felt a strong urge to leave this city. I had wanted to leave for a long time, as the city had both fueled and exhausted my fantasies for 2 years. Countless sleepless nights, I fantasized that one day Jianwei would return to me, but each fantasy shattered, leaving me more and more weary. Now, I finally didn't need to fantasize anymore, for Jianwei had someone else. When Xiang Chen placed the commitment necklace on her, I woke up completely. I wished to leave behind all fantasies, disappointments, and loneliness in this city and walk away. Let the cold autumn wind tear apart all this damned emotion, leaving it irrelevant to me. How liberating that would be. I wanted to leave. To return to the city where I grew up, where my mother knits sweaters for the cold, and my father brews iced tea for the heat. But I couldn't leave this city, my soul was deeply embedded here. There was a guitar singing of loneliness, an empty city holding memories, and an old house comforting me. Sitting on the bench at the bus stop, I watched bus after bus carry passengers to every corner of the city. Yet, on this night, I seemed to have nowhere to go. The last 32 bus stopped at the station, jolting me awake. I hurriedly boarded, dropped in a coin, and finally had an identity, a passenger. This night, I would ride the 32 bus through 6 streets back to that old house. Subconsciously, I didn't want to leave that old house. So this morning, I took a risk and went to Mitsai's room to find a key to the house, naively thinking she had really left it for me and wouldn't return. I took out the key, opened the door, and unexpectedly heard the sound of someone washing up in the bathroom. Looking at the shoe rack, I saw a pair of Chanel crystal-embellished women's shoes Mitsai had returned. I silently stood at the bathroom door and suddenly said, "You're back?" Mitsai wasn't startled, perhaps having heard me open the door she ignored me, still angry about my shameless behavior yesterday. "Did you just brush your teeth?" I asked again. Mitsai glanced at her toothbrush and replied, "Why do you ask?" "I woke up late this morning and didn't have time to buy toiletries, so I used yours," I said. Mitsai's expression darkened, and she breathed heavily. You left so decisively yesterday, I thought you wouldn't come back. Otherwise, I would have told you or bought a new set for you." Mitsai looked at me with the same expression as when she saw a cockroach, angrily shouting, "Disgusting." "You're a beauty, I certainly don't find it disgusting. It's just a minor thing," I said honestly. For me, this was indeed trivial. In college, a few guys would share a cigarette, not caring about saliva. By comparison, using a toothbrush was nothing. Besides, I intended to buy her a new one. Who knew she'd return tonight? I meant your behavior is disgusting. I innocently said, using your toothbrush doesn't disgust me, you really don't need to worry. Mitsai's anger grew, and she threw the toothbrush, towel, and even her cosmetics into the trash. She walked past me at the bathroom door, pushed me hard, and for the first time, cursed, "Get lost." I grabbed Mitsai, suddenly enlightened, and said, "Oh. So, it's my use of your toothbrush that disgusts you. You need to improve your communication skills, you couldn't even explain this clearly." Chapter 45, To See or Not to See. Mitsai bit her lip as she looked at me, her frustration palpable. After a long silence, she finally spoke with a darkened expression. "Why is it that there are people like you with such a lack of decency in this world?" I released my grip on her, nonchalantly replying, "Can't you see things from both sides? My using your toiletry shows I'm not picky about trivial matters. Did you get my permission to use them? That's exactly why I said I'm not concerned with the small stuff. Is it really necessary to make a big fuss over such minor things? But I used the toothbrush without knowing you had already used it," Mitsai said, her expression showing clear disgust. "It's already done. What do you expect me to do, find a magical artifact to turn back time and warn you? It's impractical. So just take it lightly. You have to understand, nothing in this world is real, neither you nor I, nor the toothbrush." Finally, her anger seemed to subside a bit. "Who knows if you have some infectious disease? If I do, then it's just bad luck for you. Think about how slim the chances are that we would meet among billions of people, and then that I would use your toothbrush. I assent that even slimmer?" Barely pacified, Mitsai grew angry again. "By your logic, everything that happens is my fault, and I deserve the bad luck? You could say that." I smiled at her. "You seem to understand me well. You can read my mind without trying." Furious, she laughed sarcastically. "The mind of a scoundrel like you is easy to read. Your kind has a predictably vile face. You're cursing again. Even if I am a scoundrel, a graceful lady like you shouldn't use such language. It spoils your image. Zhao Yang, are you determined to anger me to death today? If you're afraid of being angered to death, then leave and give me this house. We'll both be more comfortable and peaceful." Suddenly calm, she said, "In your dreams. I won't let a scum like you get your way. I'm not leaving tonight. If you don't mind, I certainly won't mind the chance to live together again." Unexpectedly, she didn't argue back but turned and went to the bathroom, shutting the door heavily. I sat on the sofa, turned on the TV, but kept glancing at the bathroom, suspecting a plot. The memory of her tricking me into the wilderness late at night flashed through my mind, causing a shiver of fear. How could someone as clever as me fall for the same trick twice? I reassured myself, feeling a bit more at ease. Feeling more relaxed, I decided to go downstairs to the convenience store to buy some toiletries. I took the key with me to prevent her from locking me out. With a slight pang of guilt, I bought the most expensive toiletries for Mitsai, settling for the cheapest for myself. I'm not a fussy person after all. After strolling and smoking a few cigarettes to dispel my anxiety, I returned to the apartment. Mitsai emerged from the bathroom, her hair damp from a shower. "Didn't you throw away your toiletries? How did you manage to shower?" I asked. "Did you think I wouldn't have backups?" Annoyed, I said, "You could have told me. I just bought a set for over $50. "Really?" she replied calmly, drying her hair with a new towel, acting as if nothing unpleasant had just transpired. "Look." I held up the bag for her to see. "Put them in the bathroom cabinet for future use." Her tone remained calm. I walked to the bathroom, filled with steam and the scent of shower gel, cautiously surveying for any tricks. The bathroom contained nothing but her discarded clothes. Convinced of its safety, I opened the cabinet under the sink to find it stocked with spare toiletries. Had I known, I wouldn't have used hers. I really don't enjoy quarrels over trivial matters. After washing up, I emerged from the bathroom, toweling my wet hair, and was surprised to see Mitsai still in the living room, eating cherries and reading documents. "Why aren't you sleeping?" I asked. "Waiting for my hair to dry." I sat beside her, helping myself to the cherries. "Do you like cherries?" "Yes, I've loved them since I was little." Her uncharacteristically patient response threw me off. Given my recent behavior, I expected no more than a curt reply. Yet she shared a bit of her past. I bolstered my courage. What could she possibly do to me? I resolved to stay calm and not overthink. Bored, I glanced at the document in her hand and saw the logo of Zhuomei Shopping Center. It confirmed she was indeed the CEO. "Hey, do you know what I do for a living?" I asked. "Who cares?" she responded, irritation returning to her voice. I laughed awkwardly, feeling more at ease. It didn't surprise me that she knew nothing of my job at Bolia's planning department. Even if Zhuomei had our personnel files, she likely wouldn't look at a low-level employee like me. I certainly wouldn't volunteer the information either, driven by my pride. In this apartment, at least, I felt we were equals. Well, not exactly, since I was better than her when it came to dealing with cockroaches, a point I boasted about. Silently lost in my thoughts, I became even more complacent, tossing more cherries into my mouth and humming Fei Wong's new tenant. Annoyed, she slammed her document on the table and walked away. "Where are you going?" I asked. "To do laundry." She didn't look back. "You're not kicking me out tonight, right? If you want to stay, then stay." Her voice was filled with loathing. "Are you staying with me?" "Of course, I'm staying." Her response delighted me. I fantasized about moving my things in tomorrow. This apartment was my dream home in the city. I continued humming new tenant to irritate her, my eyes fixed on the document she left. My heart raced. It was Zhuomei's November business plan. It likely contained strategic plans against Boli, including upcoming promotions. If I read it, Zhuomei's strategy would be clear, giving us a significant advantage. Should I read it or not? I was caught in a dilemma. Chapter 46, Mikai's Revenge. After a brief struggle, I ultimately chose not to peruse the business plan Mikai had left on the coffee table. I may not be a person of unimpeachable integrity, but I refuse to stoop to such petty and underhanded tactics. I constantly remind myself to live within certain moral boundaries. I could never compromise my principles by resorting to thievery to harm Mikai and her Zhuomei shopping center. The sound of the washing machine's drum rotating emanated from the bathroom. Shortly after, Mikai emerged, returned to the sofa, and once again immersed herself in the monthly business plan, treating my presence beside her as if I were air. Feeling invisible, I remarked, "By the way, I borrowed a set of bedding from your room yesterday. Surely, you wouldn't want me sleeping in your bed, as that would be even more revolting for you. So, I thought you wouldn't mind." "Not at all, go ahead," she replied nonchalantly. Her sudden change in demeanor made me feel a pang of guilt, as though I had wronged her. Despite being the CEO of Zhuomei, she is, after all, just a woman. My previous actions lacked gentlemanly conduct. "I'm going to bed." "You should rest early too, don't stay up too late," I said gently. "Okay, I'll go to bed after the laundry is done." Returning to my room, I felt a sense of regained joy. I could finally reside openly in the room where I had lived for over 2 years. I thanked the heavens for their favor, for my shameless persistence, and for Mikai's conscience. Having exhausted my gratitude, I suddenly relaxed, and sleepiness overcame me. After wandering for over a week, I was finally able to sleep soundly. As expected, I slept deeply that night, undisturbed until dawn. I awoke refreshed, quickly transitioning into wakefulness. I sat up and looked out the window. Despite the autumn leaves swirling in the wind, the sunshine was pleasant, and the temperature comfortable. I wiped my face, fully shaking off the morning grogginess. It was just past 7:30, the perfect time to get up. After washing up, I decided to cook some porridge and buy breakfast. Naturally, I intended to get a portion for Mikai as well. I believed there should be no lingering animosity between us. As a man, I could humble myself to show goodwill, fostering harmony in our shared living space. Approaching the cabinet where the rice was stored, I was surprised to find it locked. Perplexed but not suspicious, I moved to check the refrigerator, only to discover it completely empty. A foreboding sense of dread washed over me. Rushing to the door, I found it securely locked. The realization hit me, I was imprisoned by Mikai in this apartment. Damn it! No wonder she told me I could stay as long as I wanted last night. How could I have been so blind? I cursed, running to my room in desperation, only to find the door locked, the key taken while I slept. Staying calm under duress, I thought of calling a locksmith. Grabbing my phone, I felt it was significantly lighter. Opening the back cover, I was met with the sight of a missing battery. Gritting my teeth, I walked back to the living room, helpless. This apartment was on the 5th floor, jumping out was not an option. The entire morning, I wandered like a headless chicken. If it were the weekend, it wouldn't matter, but today was the day Fong Yuan returned to the company. There would undoubtedly be a meeting to discuss the recent promotional plans, a crucial meeting. Missing it would certainly impede the progress, and I could already envision Chen Jingming and Fong Yuan's furious faces. The more I thought, the angrier I became, yearning to strangle Mi Kai. I felt like a helpless insect trapped in a box, with no escape. She seemed determined to ruin me. With no food and the electricity cut off from outside, I dreaded how unbearable the day would be. I lay on the sofa, each second feeling like an eternity. I repeatedly shouted from the balcony, but no one responded, as if the entire neighborhood had been bribed by Mi Kai. Perhaps it was just my terrible luck. Regardless, I remained trapped, my strength waning. By noon, hunger left me dizzy, and my resentment towards Mi Kai grew. I doubted she'd keep me confined forever. Surely, she would return by tonight to release me. In my rage, I decided, as soon as she returned, I would call the police. Her actions constituted illegal detention and theft of my phone's battery. She had to face the consequences, she had gone too far. Birds chirped on the balcony, flaunting their freedom, while the weak evening sun filtered through the curtains. I lay powerless on the sofa, my head spinning. I prayed for this hellish day to end. Finally, the last rays of sunlight vanished, and darkness enveloped the room. I lacked the strength to move, but Mi Kai had not returned. Fear crept in. She wouldn't really leave me here to die, would she? By morning, I'd be as good as dead. The room was pitch black, and the anxiety of being imprisoned grew stronger. I was on the verge of madness, each second in agony. My vision blurred, and I felt faint. Time crawled. Just as I was about to give up, I heard the sound of keys at the door. An adrenaline rush brought clarity. I tried to stand but fell off the sofa, hitting my shoulder on the coffee table. The pain was blinding. Suddenly, the lights came on, and I heard Mi Kai's surprised voice, "Jiayang, why didn't you turn on the lights? And sleeping on the floor? Aren't you cold?" Chapter 47, You Are a Female Hooligan. I struggled to stand up from the floor, glaring at the astonished Mi Kai. "Come here, let me strangle you." "What's wrong?" Mi Kai asked, feigning innocence. I laughed bitterly in my anger. "You lock me in here all day, and you ask what's wrong. The more you play innocent, the more shameless you appear." "You're delusional," Mi Kai retorted indifferently, slipping on her slippers. I staggered towards her, my legs weak, using the last of my strength to grab her. "Why did you lock the door today? Isn't it normal to lock the security door?" I was still inside. "Didn't you know?" Mi Kai shook her head. "I thought you had already left." "Fine, assuming you didn't know I was home, why did you take the key while I was sleeping?" "Why shouldn't I take the key to my own house?" she responded coldly. My head throbbed with anger. "Fine, but how do you explain the missing battery from my phone? Who took your battery? When I accidentally knocked your phone over, the battery might have fallen out. It was dark, so I just put the cover back on. Damn it, you've covered every angle to ruin me. Even if I wanted to blame you, I couldn't." Mi Kai smiled. "Using your words, it's your bad luck to meet Mado. You know how slim the chances are for us to meet in this fast world? And then, the odds of me locking you in here? So you admit it?" "Yes, and what of it? Go ahead, call the police. Tell them I unlawfully detained you. But you won't. After all, you're a man and I'm just a woman. Besides, you're the landlord. Who would believe the landlord was locked in by a tenant?" Her words were like a heavy blow, mirroring my past taunts. I couldn't think of a retort and finally blurted out, You're a female hooligan, a devil, a witch. Does your shameless behavior suit that pretty face of yours?" Mi Kai remained unfazed. "Those words should be reserved for you. If it weren't for your actions, I wouldn't have retaliated. But your retaliation is too cruel. You locked me up for a whole day, I couldn't call out. What will my company think? This is worse than skipping work, I might lose my job." Mi Kai gazed at me for a long moment before saying softly, "Aren't you hungry after all this talking?" As if on cue, my legs wobbled and my stomach growled dizzy with hunger and anger. I instinctively rested my hand on her shoulder, swallowing my pride. Help me down to eat some zaijiangmian, the biggest bowl. At the noodle shop downstairs, I inserted the battery into my phone and nervously turned it on. Immediately, it exploded with dozens of message notifications, all from missed calls by Fang Yuan and Chen Jingming. I threw my phone aside in frustration, glaring at Mikai, who sat calmly across from me. Mikai stood up. I've brought you here. Eat slowly. Sit down. This isn't over. Did you hear the notification? They were all from the company. What now? For the first time, Mikai looked somewhat guilty. She spoke softly. I never thought you had a proper job. I really didn't know. I was speechless. Given my previous state, it wasn't surprising she thought I was jobless trying to remain calm. I said, even if I didn't have a proper job, I'd still need some organization and discipline. Haven't you seen beggars in underground tunnels? They still gather and divide begging territories. Mikai fell silent before asking, what do you want me to do? Seeing her soften, I felt a bit guilty myself. After all, my actions had provoked her. As a CEO, she had every right to be upset. I won't make it difficult for you. Just call my boss and explain why I didn't make it to work today. If I can keep my job, I'll let this go. Can't you explain it yourself? He won't believe me. That's why I need you. I gave her a stern look. Seems like you often trick your boss, don't you? Give me the number. Her accusation hit home, and I coughed awkwardly before giving her Chen Jingming's number. She dialed immediately. Curious about Chen Jingming's reaction if he knew Zomiai's CEO was calling him, I listened and the call connected, and Mikai began, hello, is this Manager Chen? I'm Zhayan's roommate. I locked him in by accident today, and his phone malfunctioned. I apologize for any inconvenience. Her tone, though polite, carried the authority of her position. She handed the phone to me. Your manager wants to talk to you. Taking the phone, I quickly said, Manager, did you hear that? Today's absence was an accident. Chen Jingming's voice was angry yet resigned. Is that true? I swear it is. I wouldn't go to such lengths to deceive you. Fine, this time I'll treat it as an accident. Be in early tomorrow and coordinate with Fang Yuan. This plan must be done efficiently. Don't worry, I'll be there first thing. After explaining to Fang Yuan, I felt relieved. The zaijiangmian arrived, and I devoured 2 large bowls before stopping. Wiping my mouth, I said to Mikai, you mentioned we're roommates, right? Predicting my thoughts, Mikai denied it. That was just to explain the situation. Otherwise, how could I have explained it? Oh. So you can lie and trick people too. Chapter 48, nearly numb with pain. When I accused Mitsai of lying and trying to deceive me, she remained calm and replied, I remember telling you last time that living together is inconvenient for both of us. Our lifestyles and habits are vastly different. Why do you keep making things difficult for me, dragging this on endlessly? I responded just as calmly, don't say that. Am I really bothering you? I care about that house. If you move out, I will never bother you again. Mitsai nodded and said, I believe that, but the property deed clearly has my name on it. What does your concern matter? I earnestly told her, put yourself in my shoes. If you lived in a house for over 2 years and suddenly had to move out, how would you feel? In Suzhou, we have no home, constantly drifting. We deeply long for a place to belong, especially at night. You can never understand the fear of having nowhere to go, it's oppressive and helpless. Mitsai fell silent. I, too, was silent. Our conflict stemmed not just from a house, but from the social barriers that made us unable to understand each other, each holding firm, tormenting one another in the process. After a long pause, I questioned Mitsai, if you really wanted me to leave, you could call the police. Why haven't you? Mitsai looked at me and, after a moment of silence, said, you're not bad enough for me to call the police on you. I smiled and said, well, I'm glad. Glad that I'm not completely incorrigible. Despite my sarcastic remark, Mitsai earnestly replied, you helped Cece keep the restaurant running and became friends with someone like her. You can't be all that bad. Life and love have put too much pressure on you, making you seem like a scoundrel. Your cynicism is just a defense mechanism. I gazed at Mitsai, stunned. She understood me better than anyone, better than Fang Yuan, Yen Yen, Robin, or even CC, my closest friends. Her insight touched a deep, unresolved part of me, though it didn't completely unravel it. Finally, I said to Mitsai, "Are you affirming my character so that I'll feel ashamed and leave you in peace? Don't play games with me. I know the tactics of gentle persuasion." Mitsai remained silent, her expression helpless, realizing my resolve. I now knew her limits, she couldn't force me out. And I certainly wouldn't let her trap me again. A clever, alert person like me wouldn't fall for the same trick thrice. I didn't feel ashamed for bothering Mitsai. After all, she had a luxury home in this city. If she left, she wouldn't experience the fear of having nowhere to go. Of course, I wouldn't live in the old house for free, I would pay the rent. My plan was simple: if Mitsai compromised, it would be a win-win for us. Yes, she was beautiful, wealthy, the CEO of Zhuomei, but that didn't mean I had to like her or seek anything from her. If she rented me the house, I wouldn't bother her again. After pondering for a moment, I suggested to the silent Mitsai, "Why don't you rent this house to me? You have another place in Luoyang Gingyuan. Move there and give me a bank account number. I'll transfer the rent monthly, and we won't even have to see each other." Mitsai, with a hint of anger, rejected my proposal. "You were so determined to move out last time. Why have you changed your mind? I'm just a rogue, swaying with the wind. Besides, I thought I'd find a suitable place, but it's either too expensive or too far from my company. Drifting around has made me unhappy, so I want to move back." Mitsai looked at me in exasperation and said, "Your reasons are very thorough, both subjective and objective. Of course, I always cover all bases. But don't you think you're being unreasonable, forcing someone to rent their house to you?" Mitsai replied, still patient. I retorted, "Unreasonable? Shall I call my friends over and let them judge who's being unreasonable? You're like those old-time tyrants, using money to oppress us poor folks." Mitsai finally lost her patience. She grabbed her bag, stood up, and said, "I don't have time for this. I won't rent the house to you, so stop fantasizing." I followed her out of the noodle shop, intent on continuing our discussion and resolving the matter tonight. Fearing I'd catch up, Mitsai walked quickly, her high heels clicking on the pavement. I wasn't slow either, taking a few large strides to block her path. I demanded, "Will you rent it or not?" Before I could finish, a sharp pain gripped my stomach, causing me to double over. I hadn't eaten all day, then overate. My already weak stomach couldn't handle it. Taking advantage of my moment of weakness, Mitsai walked around me without a second glance. "Do you have no conscience? I'm in pain, and you just watch me suffer?" Mitsai paused, turned back, and said, "Are you trying to play the sympathy card? I've told you clearly, I won't rent you the house." I was in agony, sweat beading on my forehead. Mitsai finally returned to my side, crouching down and asking with suspicion, "What's wrong with you?" "I told you. My stomach hurts. Are you really going to leave me here? Last time, when you had a fever, did I not make you ginger soup? Did I not buy you medicine?" I said, grimacing. "Is this the time to be petty? Did I say I'd leave you? I'll call an ambulance." Mitsai took out her phone. "What planet are you from? Don't you have any common sense? It's just a stomachache. You don't call an ambulance for that. There's a pharmacy 100 meters to the right across the street. Get me some quick relief stomachache chewables. I'll be fine after taking a couple." Mitsai gave me an exasperated look and said, "You can't save your breath, can you? Fine, I'll go wait here." I grimaced, "Hurry up, I'm in so much pain I might go numb." Mitsai nodded and hurried across the street. Watching her retreating figure, I sat on the ground, writhing in pain. Chapter 49, Jianwei's Invitation. Returning to the old house where countless arguments with Mitsai had taken place, I chewed on the tablets and lay on the sofa to ease the pain. Mitsai poured me a glass of warm water and then sat down across from me. "Are you feeling better?" she asked. "I'll be fine after a bit of rest." Mitsai nodded. "Once you're better, I'll take you back." I sat up, wincing. "Back where? Aren't you staying with your friend temporarily? I'll take you there." Annoyed, I replied, "Can't you show some humanitarian spirit? I'm a patient right now." Unfazed, Mitsai said, "This is my house, not a hospital. Why should I host a patient here? If you think your condition is serious, I can take you to the hospital. I lay back down on the sofa, unwilling to engage further, and we fell into another cold silence due to our differing views. After a short while, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I turned over, took out the phone, and saw it was an unfamiliar number from Shanghai. I answered with some curiosity, "Hello, who is this?" After a brief silence, the voice on the other end said, "It's me, Jianwei." My mind went blank, even the pain in my stomach vanished. After a long pause, I mechanically replied, "What's up? Come out for a chat. I'll wait for you at the usual place." Before I could respond, Jianwei hung up. She was still the same, never giving me a chance to refuse, just like when we broke up, no refusal, no questions asked. Even after the call ended, my heart was still pounding. But one thing was certain, if Jianwei invited me, I would go. At the very least, we were still ordinary friends. I finally put the phone back in my pocket and said to Mitsai, "I'm going out to meet a friend. Keep the door for me. Hurry up and leave. No need to keep the door. See if there's anything else of yours here, and take it with you." I had no desire to argue with Mitsai. After a last glance at her, I walked out, my stomach still aching, though perhaps the pain in my heart was worse. I stood outside the community, waiting for a taxi, wondering where Jianwei meant by the usual place. Was it CC's music restaurant? Or by the moat? I couldn't be sure. It indicated that we had too many memories in Suzhou, too many places we had lingered, each a fragment of our unforgettable past. I eventually decided to go to the moat, where we used to take evening walks daily, laughing and enjoying the picturesque scenery. 15 minutes later, I arrived at the moat, at the stretch we often frequented. I sat on the grass, lit a cigarette despite my stomach pain, feeling anxious and uncertain. I didn't know why Jianwei had suddenly asked to meet, what my feelings towards her were, or what we would say. Time had eroded our intimacy into ignorance. Half an hour passed, and Jianwei still hadn't arrived. In the chilly autumn wind, I realized I might have come to the wrong place. Maybe Jianwei was waiting at CC's music restaurant. I immediately called her, but her phone was busy. Moments later, she called me back. Perhaps we had dialed each other at the same time. When I answered, Jianwei told me she was at CC's restaurant. I told her I was by the moat. She said she would come to me, and I naturally agreed. Ending the call, I resumed my wait. I felt a pang of regret I hadn't chosen the place Jianwei had in mind. Our hearts no longer aligned, making our breakup inevitable. The autumn wind enveloped the night, neon lights reflecting off everything around me. By the moat, I lit another cigarette, watching the smoke dissipate. 20 minutes later, a Cadillac CTS pulled up by the bank. This top-of-the-line CTS was a graduation gift from Jianwei's father 3 years ago. It was this car that had brutally torn us from our simple campus romance. I vividly remembered, the day Jianwei took me for a ride in her new car, I forced a smile, sensing our impending breakup, a premonition that proved accurate. Jianwei stepped out of the car, dressed lightly in a short leather jacket and loose gray-white pants, her hair simply tied back. She looked casual, unlike the last time I saw her in a bar, dressed in expensive brands that I couldn't bear to look at directly. Unable to meet her gaze, I turned my head, taking a deep drag on my cigarette, nearly burning it to the filter in one puff. Jianwei's familiar scent filled my nostrils as she approached. I finally looked up at her and said stiffly, "Why did you ask me here?" "Do I need a reason to invite you?" she replied, sitting down beside me. Trying to relax, I forced a smile. "Weren't you in Nanjing with Xiangchen? Why are you back so soon?" "I have my plans." "Of course, you have your plans," I echoed, not knowing what else to say. I lit another cigarette, staring at the windswept river, feeling a mix of confusion and anxiety. Jianwei took the cigarette from my fingers. "Don't smoke in front of a lady. Be a bit more gentlemanly." My lips twitched. Jianwei demanding I be gentlemanly? Time truly changes people. She used to enjoy fooling around with me, even smoking my cigarettes. Now, I realized she had long since left my world, while I stood still, unable to keep up, so out of place smoking in front of her. After a moment of silence, I finally asked, "Why did you ask me out? We shouldn't just sit here in the cold wind." Despite my words, I was willing to sit with her all night, to look at her, to see her 3 years later, to show her how much I loved her bright eyes, her slightly upturned lips, her radiant smile, her solemn demeanor, her womanly scent, her caring scoldings, her soft whispers in my arms, our breathless embrace after making love. I loved everything about her, everything with her. But now she was like a kite I had lost hold of, only clutching the broken string, helplessly watching her drift north, disappearing in the twilight, walking only in my memory. How desolate, how melancholy, how reluctant. Chapter 50, She is not worthy of me. I finally seized the opportunity presented by the recent question, gazing at Jianwei with rightful expectation, awaiting her response. Her proactive contact took me by surprise. Jianwei and I locked eyes, allowing me to finally discern her visage clearly. Despite time's passage, her countenance remained unchanged. I felt an impulse to embrace her, disregarding her current company or romantic affiliations, yet rationality ultimately subdued impulse, leaving me only to gaze at her, spellbound. After a pause, Jianwei addressed me, this time back in my homeland. I have no intention of returning to the United States. I nodded, but remained silent. Whether she returned to the States was inconsequential to me now. At most, I could view this matter from the perspective of ordinary friends. And you, how have you fared these past 2 years? Jianwei smiled, inquiring. Quite well. Living each day in complete freedom, I responded with a smile, albeit only partially expressing the sentiment. Indeed, I lived freely, free to think of her, free to endure the agony, free to remain immobile within the confines of past love, beyond anyone's interference. Quite liberated, wouldn't you say? That's good to hear, Jianwei nodded at me. And what about you? How have you been? Jianwei pondered the question before responding, though not as liberated as you, I have fared decently. I awkwardly replied, that's good to hear. Silence enveloped us once more, a silence seemingly mocking our past days of unreserved conversation. I felt somewhat ill at ease, unsure of what to say. Jianwei seemed to share my sentiment, finally rising and remarking, the wind grows rather cold. I shall take my leave. Oh. Very well, I replied, though remaining seated. Jianwei glanced at me before departing for the car parked along the riverbank. Meanwhile, I lit a cigarette, remaining seated, still unable to fathom the purpose of Jianwei's nocturnal visit. Our meeting, after much effort, amounted to mere exchange of words, rendering this night somewhat insubstantial and meaningless. To be precise, this encounter with Jianwei wasn't entirely devoid of meaning. Upon my return to the old house, Mia locked me out, refusing to answer despite my persistent knocks. I wondered if she and Jianwei conspired together, one luring me out, the other trapping me outside. However, such speculation proved inconsequential. What mattered was that I found myself with nowhere to go. Sitting alone in the hallway, I pondered for a long while before deciding to return to Robin's place for the night. By now, he should have returned from the bar, hopefully without Lily in tow. Back in Robin's attic on the rooftop, I pressed my ear against the door, ensuring the interior remained tranquil before knocking. After a moment, Robin opened the door. Clad in pajamas and holding a cigarette, Robin expressed surprise, "You're back." Endured a bloody day, to say the least, I sighed. Indeed, today had been utterly wretched for me. First, a day of confinement imposed by Mia, followed by a stomachache from overindulgence, and then an inexplicable rendezvous with Jianwei. Each event constituted its own ordeal, both physical and mental. When do you not endure? Robin lamented, reclining back onto his bed, taking a drag of his cigarette and a sip of his beer. I offered a resigned smile in response to Robin's jest, saying nothing further. After a brief wash-up, I lay down on the bed, lighting a cigarette. The combined smoke from our cigarettes quickly filled the already cramped room with a somber haze. Suddenly, Robin inquired, "You didn't come back these past few nights. Were you staying with that new girlfriend of yours?" "No, even Laya can see she's not my girlfriend." "Can't you?" I retorted, surprised by Robin's question. Robin asked, bewildered, "What's the situation?" "She's pretending. She's never been my girlfriend," I clarified. Robin nodded, remarking, "You two seem like creatures from different worlds." "Yes, she is not worthy of me." "You're a badass," Robin exclaimed, giving me a thumbs up. I offered no response, extinguishing my cigarette, pulling up the covers, and succumbing to the overwhelming fatigue that swept over me. Slipping into sleep swiftly the next day, I rose early, neglecting breakfast, and hailed a taxi to the office. I spent an exorbitant sum, bypassing public transportation by over 30 yuan. It was a clear waste of money. Had it not been for Mia's detestable actions, confining me for a day, causing me to miss work, I wouldn't have needed to race against time. Contemplating this, my resentment towards Mia deepened, prompting me to resolve to confront her soon. Not about life, not about ideals, but about her unjust treatment of me. Finally arriving at the office, I thought I was early, only to find Fang Yuan had beaten me to it. Before I could even greet him, he tossed a document my way, saying, "This is yesterday's meeting report. Spend half an hour reviewing it, then we'll discuss our response to Zomiai's promotional strategy." Zhong Yang, time is of the essence. Get into work mode promptly. No problem, I replied, taking a seat and picking up the meeting document to peruse. From this document, I discerned that yesterday's exchange meeting failed to solidify a clear promotional strategy. Additionally, Chen Jingming and Fang Yuan also hold divergent views on the formulation of the plan. Chen Jingming leans towards conservatism, advocating for adherence to previous promotional strategies while ensuring completion within the specified timeframe. On the other hand, Fang Yuan hopes for a breakthrough in this promotional plan compared to previous ones, aiming to truly demonstrate the transformation and momentum of our Brilliance department store into a top-tier retail establishment, even if it means slightly extending the timeline. After spending 20 minutes reviewing the meeting material, Fang Yuan and I each brewed a cup of coffee and engaged in discussion. Naturally, I supported Fang Yuan's approach. Since the company's next strategic focus is on enhancing brand image, promotional activities must inevitably evolve beyond past practices. Competing with Zomiai is just one aspect of our operations. Evidently, we must yield to the strategic priority of enhancing brand image. Of course, if we can achieve a breakthrough in the promotional plan while still meeting the deadlines, it would be a win-win situation. Following our discussion, Fang Yuan and I reached a consensus to strive for a promotional plan that breaks new ground within the allowable timeframe. However, our consensus still requires approval from Chen Jingming, the highest authority in the planning department, possessing the power of veto. Throughout the morning, Chen Jingming was absent from the office until nearly noon. Upon his arrival, he immediately summoned Fang Yuan and me to his office. His demeanor appeared unusually excited, leaving Fang Yuan and me perplexed. Once inside the manager's office, Chen Jingming instructed me to close the door before we could even have a cup of tea. He announced, "This morning, I met with the manager of Zomiai's merchandising department." Fang Yuan and I exchanged a glance, filled with doubt and astonishment. Chen Jingming had met with the manager of Zomiai's merchandising department during working hours. This raised suspicions of collusion. With barely concealed excitement, Chen Jingming proceeded to explain, "The manager of Zomiai's merchandising department, Li, is an old classmate of mine. He brought me news that could potentially alter the fate of both Brilliance and Zomiai. Within Zomiai, an internal storm is brewing, a power struggle aimed squarely at their newly appointed CEO." My heart skipped a beat. Wasn't the newly appointed CEO of Zomiai none other than Mia? Could she be facing an internal power crisis within the company? Although I speculated internally, I remained composed, awaiting Chen Jingming's further elaboration. Chapter 51, The Crisis of Mikai. I remained composed as I gazed at Chen Jingming, while Fang Yuan, filled with astonishment, inquired, "Manager Chen, are you suggesting that the higher-ups at Zhuomei intend to take action against their newly appointed CEO?" Chen Jingming nodded affirmatively and said, "Indeed, Zhuomei is a family enterprise, as you may have heard." Both Fang Yuan and I nodded simultaneously. Without being a family business, how could Mikai, at the age of 26, assume the role of CEO of such a large shopping center? However, it remained unknown what position Mikai held within this family. Chen Jingming continued, "Over 2 years ago, Zhuomei's founder, Mi Zhongxin, tragically passed away in a car accident on the highway while en route to a business meeting in Shanghai. He collided severely with a stranded truck that lacked warning signs. Since then, Zhuomei has been under the management of his younger brother, Mi Zhongda. However, Mi Zhongxin left behind a daughter, who has been studying in the United States for these past few years and only recently returned to China. She is the newly appointed CEO of Zhuomei, Betsy." Before Chen Jingming could finish his sentence, I interrupted, asking, "Manager, are you suggesting that Betsy's uncle, Mi Zhongda, is the one plotting against her?" Chen Jingming chuckled and replied, "It's quite apparent. He has been the nominal chairman of Zhuomei for these past few years. Now that Mi Zhongxin's daughter has returned to China, his position is undoubtedly threatened. When one has grown accustomed to being in a position of power, descending from it becomes quite difficult." I exclaimed indignantly, "This old scoundrel is beyond reprehensible. Zhuomei originally belonged to his brother, and now that his brother has tragically passed away, leaving behind an orphan, how can he, as an uncle, bring himself to take such actions?" Chen Jingming waved his hand, his expression stern as he addressed me, "The intricacies of these family enterprises are not our concern as outsiders. What we must do now is seize this opportunity, exert pressure on Zhuomei, and establish ourselves as the leading force in Suzhou's retail industry." Fang Yuan nodded in agreement, and though I remained silent, an uncontrollable anger welled up within me. Chen Jingming continued, addressing us. Li, the manager of Zhuomei's merchandising department, spoke to me this morning about this matter. Next month, 2 top international brands' lease contracts with Zhuomei will expire. Mi Zhengde has instructed Li to, under the pretext of dissatisfaction with the current CEO's management style, lure these 2 brands to our Bailey, and then, with this as grounds, collaborate with the board of directors to confront Mi Zhongxin's daughter, pressuring her to relinquish her shares in Zhuomei, thereby achieving his complete monopoly over the company. Once again, I expressed my shock, saying, this is excessively ruthless. He would rather sever a limb than relinquish control over Zhuomei. Indeed, this revelation astonished me. If Zhuomei's merchandising manager truly succeeded in persuading 2 top international brands to join our Bailey, we would possess 10 international brands in total, leaving Zhuomei with just 9. Everyone understood the significance of international brands for top-tier department stores. Even if Mi Zhengde were to gain ownership of Zhuomei, the cost would be immense. Chen Jingming smiled and remarked, for Mi Zhengde to completely seize control of Zhuomei, such ruthless measures are necessary. There are many of Mi Zhongxin's loyalists within the board of directors. They staunchly support Mi Zhongxin's daughter. If Li, under the guise of dissatisfaction with the current CEO's management style, manages to lure 2 top international brands to our Bailey, it will be perceived as a severe management failure caused by the CEO. Such a failure has already jeopardized the company's foundation. Even the initial supporters would waver. By then, with collective pressure from the board of directors, it would be difficult for Mikai to withhold both management and ownership rights. At this moment, Fang Yuan, who had been silent all along, finally turned to Chen Jingming and asked, is Mi Zhengde not afraid that his actions will severely weaken Zhuomei, allowing us, Bailey, to surpass it? I took the initiative to answer instead of Chen Jingming, saying, even if Bailey were to surpass it, Mi Zhengde would still remain the highest authority in Zhuomei. If Mi Zhongxin's daughter continues to stay with Zhuomei, she will eventually replace him. For a leader who has been in power for many years and is accustomed to being at the top, how could he willingly accept living under someone else's shadow? Chen Jingming nodded in approval of my words and continued, human nature is as such. Therefore, this presents an extraordinary opportunity for us, Bailey. However, Mi Zhengde is not a simple figure. It is rumored that a considerable amount of overseas capital will be injected into Zhuomei soon. Zhuomei's stores in Nanjing and Shanghai are already in preparation for opening. Their strategic territory is expanding beyond just Suzhou, into larger markets. Furthermore, even if they lose 2 top international brands, with the popularity Zhuomei has built over the years in Suzhou, it will not collapse easily. Mi Zhengde holds some trump cards, which is why he dares to act in such a manner. As long as he succeeds in dealing with Mi Zhongxin's daughter this time, he will firmly secure his position. Compared to that, the risks are worthwhile. Both Fang Yuan and I fell into silence. Despite our years of experience, the ruthlessness and brutality of the business world had never been so starkly presented before us. At this moment, I understood that there were indeed rules in the workplace or market. Those of us at the bottom striving for advancement relied on hard work and the ability to seize opportunities, while those at the top played a different game, one of cunning and strategy. This Machiavellian mindset filled me with genuine dread, magnifying the ugliness of human nature several times over. At this moment, Chen Jingming finally prepared himself a cup of tea, took a sip, and then addressed Fang Yuan and me. You both have been my subordinates for several years, and I have earmarked you as key individuals for development, especially Fang Yuan. I see potential in you, which is why I have shared this matter, which could be considered the company's top secret, with you both. My intention is for you to seize this opportunity, not only to create value for the company but also to realize your own breakthroughs. You must both execute this promotional plan excellently. Do you understand? Fang Yuan nodded solemnly, while I found myself immersed in a certain emotional state, feeling somewhat trance-like. What about you, Zhao Yang? Chen Jingming looked at me and inquired. Fang Yuan nudged me, bringing me back to my senses. I then replied to Chen Jingming, I. Leaving Chen Jingming's office, Fang Yuan immediately pulled me into the employee lounge, lowering her voice as she asked, Zhao Yan, Chen Jingming doesn't know about your relationship with Mikai, does he? Of course not. If he knew I knew Mikai, would he have discussed this matter with me? Fang Yuan nodded, her expression serious as she continued, under no circumstances can you reveal this matter to Mikai. Besides the implications for your own career, out of gratitude for Chen Jingming's trust in us, you must keep this from Mikai. Understand? I didn't respond to Fang Yuan, still feeling somewhat dazed. Zhao Yang, you need to understand the gravity of the situation. This isn't a joke. Even if Mikai is really your girlfriend, you must keep this matter tightly sealed. Not a single word can slip out, Fang Yuan insisted. Suddenly, I erupted in anger, glaring at Fang Yuan. Are you even human? Can't you see this from Mikai's perspective? She's already lost her father, and now her own uncle is scheming against her, trying to seize her father's legacy. Can't you see how much she must be suffering? Fang Yuan firmly covered my mouth, still speaking in a hushed tone. Keep your voice down. This is a power struggle among the elites, something we small fries shouldn't meddle in. This matter concerns not only the company's interests but also Chen Jingming's personal future, even ours. If you spill the beans, can you face Chen Jingming's trust in us? Finally, I fell silent. Chen Jingming had indeed shown favor to Fang Yuan and me. If this matter were to conclude with Zhuomei's merchandising manager bringing 2 top brands to our Bailey, Chen Jingming, as the major contributor, would likely be promoted to the level of vice general manager by the company's upper echelons. Fang Yuan and I, as his confidants, would benefit as well. This matter was now entwined with the fates of too many people. Fang Yuan addressed me again in our silence. Zhao Yang, you must promise me. Pretend you never heard about this today, alright? I remained speechless for a long time, feeling as if I were standing at the crossroads of life's most difficult decisions. Chapter 52, Slowly Becoming Friends. Fang Yuan was still anxiously awaiting my response, and after a fierce internal struggle, I finally said to her, "You're right, I'll pretend I didn't hear anything." Fang Yuan asked again cautiously, "Are you sure?" I nodded and turned away from the employee lounge, but inside, a profound sense of desolation lingered. Fang Yuan was correct. This matter was of great significance, even influencing the fate of 2 shopping centers, and Chen Jingming had confided in us out of trust. If I were to betray that trust by revealing this to Mikai out of sympathy, I would be acting unjustly toward Chen Jingming. But if I kept silent and watched that lonely, indifferent woman being manipulated by her own uncle, I would be complicit in his wrongdoing. I spent the entire day feeling absent-minded, seemingly enduring an eternity before the end of the workday arrived. As I gazed at the neon lights outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, a sudden surge of inner turmoil engulfed me. After staring out of the window for a long while, I finally picked up my bag and said to Fang Yuan, who was still working, "I'm leaving now." Fang Yuan instinctively replied, then abruptly looked up at me, saying, "It's only 7, are you leaving already?" "It's not that early. It's been an hour and a half since quitting time." Fang Yuan nodded and said, "Sitting in the office won't help clear your mind, you should go home. If you come up with any good promotional ideas, let's stay in touch." I made an okay gesture, didn't bother with a "see you tomorrow," and hurriedly left the oppressive atmosphere of the office behind. Carrying my shoulder bag and a cigarette dangling from my lips, I swayed through the crowd on the street, unsure of where to go but feeling increasingly heavy-hearted. Across the street, 50 meters ahead, the giant logo of Zhuomei Shopping Center shimmered atop the building. But who could see beyond this glittering facade to the struggles beneath? Who could penetrate this brightness to see the ugliness of human nature? Mechanically, I gradually approached Zhuomei Shopping Center and found my thoughts aimlessly guiding my body into the mall along with the crowd. In truth, I had no idea why I had come to Zhuomei. Perhaps subconsciously, I wished to inform Mikai of this conspiracy against her, to spare her from this disaster, yet another force held me back, leaving me feeling lost and thoughtless. Taking the elevator from the first floor to the 6th, I found myself at a loss upon reaching the top floor. There were no more floors beyond the 6th, and I had nowhere else to go. I found a bench for customers to rest on and sat down, feeling somewhat absent-minded as I watched the passing shoppers. Suddenly, the elevator doors across from me, leading to Zhuomei's office area, opened. I looked up to see Mikai stepping out, followed by a young female assistant. Almost instinctively, I didn't want her to notice me. I stood up from the bench, quickly slipped into the nearest store, and vanished. The receptionist's welcome echoed in my ears as I looked around. Dazzled by the array of colors of women's lingerie and underwear, I struggled to focus. "Sir, are you here to help your wife pick out lingerie?" the receptionist warmly greeted me. I forcibly swallowed back the words, "Do I look like someone with a wife?" and instead, with a smile, said to the receptionist, "Yes, please recommend something sexy." The receptionist promptly selected an item and began to enthusiastically introduce it to me. While I nodded in agreement and praised her, my gaze wandered outside. I didn't spot Mikai, perhaps she had already left the building. Relief flooded over me, and I interrupted the receptionist, who was still talking non-stop, saying, "This lingerie is indeed nice, but it's too cheap. Haven't you learned during training to assess customers' purchasing power based on their attire?" "Look here," I said, lifting my shoulder bag to reveal the logo. "This is a Rikita's bag." "You've probably never heard of Rikita's. Let me enlighten you. Rikita's is the latest luxury brand jointly created by Reebok, Nike, and Adidas. This bag is their newly launched global limited edition in 3 words, it's ultra luxurious. Do you think someone of my status would buy lingerie from your second-tier brand?" The receptionist was taken aback, and I slung my bag over my shoulder, preparing to leave. But then, I suddenly noticed Mikai and her assistant standing outside the lingerie store, staring at me with an odd expression. With a forced smile, I approached Mikai and said, "What a coincidence to bump into you here. I work here. But why are you in a women's lingerie store?" Mikai asked with a disdainful look, as if I were some kind of pervert. I sighed lightly and said evasively, "So, you work here? Are you in charge of the building?" Mikai shook her head, still looking at me with contempt as she asked pointedly, "You still haven't answered my question. Why are you in a women's lingerie store?" Impatiently, I replied, "Can you stop giving me that look like I'm some kind of pervert? I went into the lingerie store to avoid running into you. I saw you coming down the elevator just now. If you're avoiding me, I'll be grateful if you don't bother me," Mikai said, her expression skeptical. I sighed and said, "I do feel guilty." It was a truthful admission. If I ultimately chose not to inform Mikai about Mijongda's power scheme against her, I would feel a strong sense of guilt and remorse. Mikai smiled and said, "You should have felt guilty a long time ago. Find a place to live and stabilize for now. Isn't that good enough?" Mikai clearly misunderstood the true meaning of my guilt, but I couldn't explain it to her. So, I changed the subject again, saying, "Haven't eaten yet? Let's grab a meal together. It seems inevitable that we'll bump into each other." Mikai glanced at her watch and nodded, saying to me, "It's time for dinner. I heard there's a new noodle shop on the first floor. The noodles there are supposed to be good." "Are you treating me?" I asked. Mikai replied with a half smile, "With your Rikita's bag, do you still need someone else to treat you for a bowl of noodles?" Me. Although Mikai said she wouldn't treat me, when we entered the noodle shop, she queued up with the crowd. At that moment, she seemed like an ordinary girl engulfed in the crowd, devoid of any CEO demeanor. A wave of inexplicable sadness and struggle swept over me. Perhaps I shouldn't have invited her to dinner, even if it was just for a bowl of noodles. A short while later, Mikai sat opposite me with her order ticket in hand. She glanced at my bag and smiled, asking, "When did a Rikita's brand come out? Looks impressive." Seeing her smile, I realized that after countless arguments, we had started treating each other like acquaintances. We would joke around, invite each other for meals, and help each other with small tasks within our capacity. As long as we didn't touch on that old house, we were slowly becoming like friends. Chapter 53, A Benevolent Woman. I glanced at my backpack as directed by Micah's gaze, then remarked, "Indeed, my backpack is from Rokita's, but not as extravagant as I made it sound. I bought it for 50 yuan on Taobao and even received a complimentary sun hat." Micah bit her lip to suppress her laughter, but I was captivated by her demeanor, which was exceedingly beautiful at that moment. Finally managing to contain her smile, Micah inquired, "Is the sun hat also from Rokita's?" Who remembers? Last time, a friend borrowed it for fishing and never returned it, quite lacking in integrity. It must be from Rokita's then, so luxurious. Your friend must have harbored covetous thoughts. Micah analyzed solemnly. This time, Micah amused me, but I spoke earnestly. That's why I say he lacks integrity. Selling one's character for a hat, if he liked it, he could have just told me. Someone so extravagant, would I really care about a mere hat? Micah shook her head with a smile, refraining from further conversation with me. Perhaps she didn't quite appreciate my penchant for rambling. Sometimes, she seemed genuinely amused by me, yet it was tinged with a hint of resignation. The waiter finally brought 2 bowls of rice noodles and some other snacks, and Micah and I began to eat. Throughout the meal, I occasionally stole glances at Micah from the corner of my eye. She remained quiet throughout, yet in her silence, I perceived a sense of solitude, unrelated to material possessions. It stemmed from her background, yet she persisted in leading a resilient, independent life. At least since I've known her, I've never heard her complain about life. Lost in thought, I gazed at her, contemplating the conspiracy she was about to face. I felt a pang of sorrow and intense struggle, yet also a profound sense of helplessness. As we neared the end of this simple dinner, I finally said to Micah, "I still owe you 10,016 yuan. Micah nonchalantly replied, "I haven't forgotten, but you don't need to rush to repay me first. Find a place to live, as you said yourself, don't experience that kind of agony of having nowhere to go again." You remember my words quite clearly. You said that to me last night. Of course, I remember. I changed the subject, asking, yesterday, when I returned after meeting my friends, "Why did you lock the door and not let me in?" I knocked on the door for nearly 10 minutes. Even if you knocked for an hour, I wouldn't have opened it. I've told you, I won't rent the house to anyone. Then tell me, why did you buy that old house and refuse to rent it out to others? I asked again, a question that had puzzled me for a long time. Micah glanced out the window, her expression distant, before finally speaking softly, "That's my private matter, please don't inquire further." I didn't press on, vaguely understanding why she bought that old house, yet not entirely certain. In my silence, Micah, unusually proactive, said to me, "It's still early, let's go find a place together. You need to settle down quickly. Next time when your father visits, you won't know how to explain." In the dark of night, I sat in Micah's car, holding my phone, searching for rental information on 58. Whenever I found something suitable, I would make a call to inquire, while Micah acted as my chauffeur, accompanying me as we traversed every corner of the city, haggling with landlords or agents using various means. With Micah as my driver, in just over an hour, I efficiently inspected 5 houses. However, none seemed entirely satisfactory due to various reasons, so we continued navigating through this vast city. Another half an hour passed, and Micah parked the car by the roadside, reflecting with some emotion, renting a house is indeed quite challenging. Yes, there are many unscrupulous agents nowadays. If one isn't careful, they'll end up being deceived. Micah nodded in agreement, having just experienced this firsthand despite never having had the chance to interact with such individuals before. It made me realize that sometimes, it's not that one cannot understand another, it's simply that they haven't truly lived in the other's world. "Are you thirsty? I'll get you something to drink," I asked Micah. Micah nodded, and I even forgot to inquire about her preference. I got out of the car immediately, feeling a wave of inexplicable oppression. Despite the numerous arguments over that old house, I didn't harbor any dislike toward her. As we spent more time together, I discovered she wasn't the aloof figure I initially perceived her to be. On the contrary, she was amiable, appearing indifferent yet warm-hearted. Perhaps she truly was a benevolent woman. I still remember when Ban Dai came to find me at my lowest point. Despite my egregious actions, she chose to help me, concealing my plight from Ban Dai and eventually leaving the house to me in Ban Dai. I remember the coat she draped over me by the moat, ensuring I wouldn't catch a cold, and I remember the honey milk she brewed for me when I was drunk in that small cabin at Robin's. In the turmoil of my heart, I repeatedly questioned myself, "Zhao Yang, are you really going to watch helplessly as this woman falls into her uncle's business conspiracy?" Finally, I turned to look at her sitting in the car, engulfed in the dim light of the street lamps. Her figure reflected somewhat dazed and lonely on the windowpane, and my heart ached at this sight. Yet, I still couldn't reveal the truth to her. Because of Fang Yuan, because of Chen Jingming, I couldn't selfishly ruin their promising futures. I bought 2 cups of hot lemon tea and returned to Micah's car, handing her one with a straw inserted, cautioning, "It's a bit hot, drink slowly." Micah nodded, holding the plastic cup with both hands, feeling the warmth of the lemon tea. The autumn night was already tinged with a hint of winter chill. We remained silent for a long time, until Micah asked me, "Should we continue searching?" "It's up to you. If you're not tired, I'm fine with it," I replied. Micah smiled and said, "It's best to see things through to the end as a principle. Let's make a concerted effort then. Tonight, we'll find you a house." I joked, "Miss Micah is truly warm-hearted and resourceful. If you settle my matter tonight, you'll enjoy the fruits of your labor forever." The term "enjoy the fruits of your labor" isn't quite accurate. I've put an effort to help you find a house, and besides, that house was originally mine, so it's not quite appropriate to say I'll enjoy the fruits of my labor, right? Micah said earnestly. "TCH, why so nitpicky?" I waved my hand impatiently. "Learned from you," she retorted. I took a big sip of the lemon tea with both hands, nearly scalding my mouth and almost spraying it out in surprise. Micah handed me a tissue, wiping off the tea that had spilled on her, complaining, "You just reminded me to be careful of the heat, and now you forget when you're drinking yourself." I didn't respond to Micah, but bitterness surged in my heart. Forgetting was due to absent-mindedness, and absent-mindedness stemmed from inner turmoil. At this moment, a strong impulse rose within me. I wanted to reveal to Micah the conspiracy against her. Chapter 54: The Struggle of Human Nature. Despite the pain radiating from my scalded mouth, I looked at Micah with flushed cheeks, my heart pounding violently. In my over 20 years of living, I wasn't one to hesitate or second-guess, but this time the situation was too significant. My choice not only affected my own fate but also the futures of friends, superiors in the workplace, including Laya. Her sacrifices to secure me a job opportunity remained vivid in my mind. Was I really going to ruin all of this for Micah? "Jiayang, what's wrong? You look so troubled," Micah observed, her expression puzzled. Amidst the struggle, my heart suddenly quieted. I rubbed my mouth and said to Micah, "The pain from the scald might have caused blisters in my mouth. Do you need to go to the hospital for that? Is it necessary to trouble emergency medical services for such minor injuries? Come on, can't you have some common sense about life?" "Oh, as long as you're okay. Let's continue searching for a house," Micah said, starting the car. Even the most difficult decisions are often made in an instant. In the end, I didn't choose to reveal the truth to Micah. I didn't know if it was the right decision, but my heart remained tormented. I would rather Chen Jingming didn't expose this matter, but wishes were just wishes. Eventually, I knew, and now, like a helpless boat, I floated aimlessly in the sea of self-blame, unable to see the shore. The shadows of the street lamps reflected on the car window grew longer as my thoughts scattered, unable to come up with a win-win solution amidst the dispersal. After searching late into the night, we finally found a relatively cost-effective studio apartment. I immediately paid 3 months' rent plus 1 month's deposit. Once the landlord left, it was just Micah and me in the apartment. Standing side by side on the balcony of the 26th floor, I lit a cigarette and gazed at the city's night view. After a long while, I said to Micah, "It's so quiet up here, and your old apartment is also very quiet." "Everything is quiet. Are you finally admitting that the ownership of that apartment belongs to me?" Micah asked with a smile. Now that everything's settled, why wouldn't I admit it? Micah nodded, as if relieved of a burden, then asked me, "Are you moving in tonight?" "Tomorrow night." I paused, looking at Micah sincerely. "Let me spend one last night at your place tonight, saying goodbye to my friends, my mop, my clock, my sofa, my cabinet. I'm afraid they'll miss me too much." I was prepared for Micah's rejection, but to my surprise, she agreed. Perhaps she truly believed that those seemingly unconscious objects were indeed my friends. In fact, I didn't deceive her, nor was I being melodramatic. Sometimes, I'd rather befriend these seemingly unconscious objects than engage too deeply with subjective individuals, for fear of inadvertently encountering beasts disguised as humans, some even too lazy to disguise, fearing others might not know they're beasts, like the actress who once slapped Laya due to scheduling conflicts, or Micah's uncle, Mi Zhongde. Returning to the old house with Micah, it was already very late. Micah went to the bathroom to freshen up before me. I sat on the sofa, seemingly quiet but emotions roiling inside. After a moment, Micah emerged from the bathroom, applying toner to her face. Half jokingly or perhaps sincerely, she said to me, "Jiayang, weren't you going to bid farewell to your friends? I haven't seen you move since you entered." I clutched my chest and said to Micah, "My friends and I communicate with our hearts. We've already bid farewell to each other just now." Micah nodded, looking surprised. "You have quite a high level of understanding between you and your friends." "That's for sure. In front of me and my friends, everyone else is just ordinary mortals." Micah smirked slightly, then smiled, saying nothing more as she turned towards her own room, closing the door behind her. Suddenly, I felt as though we were separated by this door, residing in two different worlds. Mine was chaotic, while hers seemed to be the calm before the storm. After freshening up, I returned to the room I had lived in for 2 years, yet was about to leave. I stared absent-mindedly at the ceiling, but my mind was not idle. For the first time in my life, I pondered deeply on the concept of humanity, finding it elusive. Take myself, for example. When faced with choices, I deviated from my long-held principles. I could attribute this deviation to friends, grateful superiors, or my own career prospects. But can these reasons truly transcend the value of humanity, allowing me to distort it with a clear conscience? As the night grew deeper, the moonlight outside the window seeped through the curtains, casting a gentle sway on the bedsheet. My consciousness gradually blurred, and after a moment, I shed the burden of humanity and entered the realm of sleep. The next day, I rose early as usual. I prepared congee in the rice cooker, then went downstairs to buy some fried dough sticks, steamed dumplings, and pastries. Back in the apartment, I fried 2 eggs in a pouch. I intended to have breakfast with Micah, not as a gesture of courtesy or gratitude for her help in finding the apartment last night, but as an act of remorse for my silence. With breakfast prepared, Micah was already awake. After a moment, she finished washing up. I offered her breakfast, saying, "Let's have breakfast together." I made some congee. Micah politely thanked me and sat opposite me. We began eating breakfast together, yet the atmosphere remained somewhat oppressive and silent. Micah seemed to enjoy the silence, while I endured the oppression. Surprisingly, she finished her meal quickly, then politely said to me, "Zhao Yang, take your time. I have to go to work now. By the way, if you don't have time to clean up the dishes, just leave them. I'll wash them when I come back tonight." With her handbag in tow, Micah walked to the shoe rack to change her shoes. Watching her back, I called out, "Wait." Micah didn't stop changing her shoes, asking somewhat puzzled, "What's wrong?" After a moment of silence, I said, "Could you give me a ride? Let me go to work with you." "Is it on your way?" she asked. "Aren't you working at Zhuanmei Shopping Center? Our company is right across from yours." Micah nodded, asking, "Oh. What company do you work for?" I hesitated before replying, "We're just a small company. I'm just earning a salary to get by, nothing worth mentioning." "Okay, hurry up then," Micah said, already wearing her shoes, standing outside the door waiting for me. Quickly finished my congee, put on my shoes, grabbed my briefcase, and followed Micah downstairs. The traffic during rush hour wasn't very good. We encountered frequent stops and starts along the way. As we neared the company, the car was once again stuck on a one-way street. Despite the lack of activity, both Micah and I maintained silence. I retrieved a CD from Micah's car storage box and inserted it into the music player, intending to pass the restless time with a piece of music. Luo Daio's rendition of Maxims of Love, with its profound and storied vocals, filled the small car. The song, expressing great love, wafted through the tiny space. The car was enveloped in the faint mist of autumn. Outside the window, cars waiting to pass all lit their hazard lights, resembling fireflies at rest, quieting the world. I became somewhat entranced in this imagined tranquility, listening to Maxims of Love. Micah seemed to be in a similar state, appearing even quieter than me. However, tears welled up in her eyes, slowly trickling down her cheeks, as if reluctant to be seen by me. She rested her head on the steering wheel, so aside from her slightly disheveled hair, I couldn't see her face at all. What's wrong with her? She only listened to a song by Luo Daio on this casual morning, yet she cried. Chapter 55, The Struggle of Humanity, Part 2. The car in front began to move slowly, but Mei remained oblivious, her shoulders trembling faintly as the car behind honked impatiently. Finally, I lightly tapped Mei's shoulder and asked, "What's wrong?" Mei lifted her head, wiping away her tears with her hand, yet she did not look at me. "It's nothing," she said softly, shifting gears and driving forward with the flow of traffic, while the strains of Words of Love came to an end, gradually restoring calm within. The Carrie had no intention of letting Mei know about my job at Brilliant Corporation, so I asked her to drop me off at a station. As we parted ways, I inquired, "Hey, could you help me move tonight if you're not working overtime? Your car would be convenient." "If I'm not working overtime tonight, sure," Mei replied without refusal. I smiled and said, "Great, I'll call you after work." Mei nodded, closed the car window, started the car, and in an instant, she disappeared from my sight amidst the vast sea of vehicles. Yet I stood there for a long time, recalling the image of her sobbing over the steering wheel just moments ago, feeling once again bewildered and adrift. I had no desire to delve into what Words of Love had stirred in her, but nonetheless, I sympathized with her, deepening my sense of guilt once more. Upon arriving at the company, before I could catch my breath, we were summoned for a brainstorming session by the members of our planning and copywriting team. During the meeting, what began as a sharing of ideas quickly escalated into a battle of wits, unleashing a tempest of creativity. Yet I remained seated in a corner, absent-minded and silent throughout, a state of quietude that persisted until the meeting's end. After the brainstorming session, as everyone dispersed with their folders, I remained seated, my thoughts adrift. Fan Yuan pulled out a cigarette and waved it under my nose, snapping me out of my reverie. Sensing the scent of tobacco, I regained my senses, and awkwardly asked, "Is the storm over?" "I'm just wondering where this storm has blown you off to," Fang Yuan replied, his tone somewhat displeased. As he was always meticulous about work without a word, I took the cigarette from between Fang Yuan's fingers, lit it, and took a deep drag, only for Fang Yuan to snatch it back, extinguish it, and toss it into the trash bin. Frowning, I muttered, "Why the hell are you picking a fight with me? I'm on edge." Fang Yuan paused for a moment, then realized the source of my agitation. He dragged a chair over and sat down beside me, his expression already conveying the forthcoming advice akin to bitter medicine. "Are you still tangled up over the matter with Zhuomei and me?" he asked. "That's exactly the issue. Since yesterday, I've felt like a criminal who hasn't confessed to his misdeeds. Do you understand this feeling? It's like a fishbone stuck in my throat." I vented, each word heavy with the weight of my oppression. Fang Yuan sighed and softened his tone. "Zhao Yang, I've already explained the situation to you clearly yesterday. Regardless of your guilt, it remains an internal affair of Zhuomei. We must distance ourselves from it." Once again, I fell into silence. There was little point in discussing this further with Fang Yuan. He simply couldn't see this from my perspective. Yet, he wasn't wrong. Although Fang Yuan and I had been friends for nearly a decade, we were not cut from the same cloth, leading disparate lives. At this moment, I began to understand why, despite graduating from the same university, our paths diverged after graduation. After a while, I said to Fang Yuan, "I'll stay a while longer. I'll figure this out on my own." Fang Yuan nodded and cautioned, "I still don't know your thoughts on this promotion plan. Let's talk privately later." "All right," I replied. Fang Yuan pulled out another cigarette from the pack and handed it to me. "Go to the smoking room if you need to smoke. Be mindful of your influence in the company." Taking the cigarette from Fang Yuan's hand, I looked at him somewhat numbly. Fang Yuan gave my shoulder a pat and then walked away, leaving me to twirl the cigarette between my fingers, feeling even more numb. At noon, Fang Yuan and I had lunch together in the company cafeteria. We chose a relatively quiet corner and didn't immediately discuss the ongoing promotional plan preparations. Fang Yuan said to me, "Yan Yan is free tonight. Let's have her cook some dishes and come over to my place for a few drinks. Let's skip today." "I have to move tonight," I replied. "Is the moving not sorted out yet?" Fang Yuan asked with some surprise. "Not yet. I just found a suitable place recently. I've been busy lately," I explained. Fang Yuan nodded, then after a brief silence, he said, "Zhao Yang, not to lecture you, but at your age, it's time to settle down. If you can, you should do so quickly." I earnestly asked Fang Yuan, "We've all graduated for so many years now. Our classmates and friends have settled down where they should, or they're desperately trying to. Why do I feel like I'm living in a delusion?" Fang Yuan almost immediately responded without much thought, "It's because you've lived too much in your own world, and yet yourself carries with it a strong idealism. Zhao Yang, you must understand, no matter how intricately built a sandcastle is on the beach, one wave is all it takes for it to crumble. Your pain and instability stem from this." Fang Yuan's words left me perplexed. I knew the wave he mentioned was the weighty reality, and my anguish stemmed from my unwillingness to accept it. So, I found solace in imagining that Sky City and the woman with long hair waiting within its walls. Fang Yuan continued, "Stop dwelling on the internal struggles of Zhuomei's upper echelons. People ultimately live in reality. While conscience is essential, this matter has transcended simple morality. If you measure it by conscience or humanity and eventually inform me, reality will immediately slap you in the face. Zhao Yang, learn to respect reality, and never endanger yourself." "Why do you keep bringing up this matter?" I asked, somewhat irritated with Fang Yuan. After a brief silence, Fang Yuan sighed softly and said, "Because I know you, and I worry." I remained silent. Although Fang Yuan and I were not of the same ilk, after nearly a decade of brotherhood, he understood me better than many. If I didn't use my conscience and humanity to weigh this matter, why would I be in such agony? Fang Yuan continued speaking to the silent me, "If Chen Jingming manages to bring in 2 top-tier brands for brilliant department store amidst Zhuomei's internal strife, with such a great achievement, he's almost guaranteed a promotion to the position of vice president in the company. As his confidant, you and I will also solidify our positions in this company. Especially you, Zhao Yang, this would be a significant elevation for your life. Your life will undergo a qualitative change." I lit another cigarette, took a deep drag, tilted my head back, closed my eyes, and exhaled all the smoke in a release of frustration. For the first time, I felt my decades-old beliefs wavering. Perhaps I really should respect reality. I had reached the age to settle down and build a career. Now that I finally glimpsed a ray of hope in life, extinguishing it by my own hand would only condemn me to struggle in darkness. Let's discuss your thoughts on this promotional plan, Fang Yuan said, pulling me momentarily out of the quagmire of my struggle. Finally, I nodded, ready to discuss my thoughts on the promotional plan with Fang Yuan. Chapter 56, Love is Not Extravagant. I organized my scattered thoughts on the promotional plan in my mind and then said to Fang Yuan, for this promotional plan, we can break free from conventional thinking. My idea is, aside from the 8 international top-tier brands, we can continue using traditional promotion methods for other regular brands, such as simple discounts and free gifts. We don't need to invest too much effort into these, as time doesn't permit us to be too scattered. Fang Yuan nodded and said, I understand your point, and I agree with your idea. The focus of this promotional activity should still revolve around the 8 international top-tier brands. Please share how you intend to integrate these 8 top-tier brands into the promotional plan. After pondering for a moment, I said, our brilliant department store carries almost all categories of daily necessities among these 8 top-tier brands, including clothing, handbags, watches, jewelry. This inclusiveness is our advantage and facilitates our promotional combinations. How do you propose to combine them? Firstly, we need to create sufficient subjective purchase motivations for consumers. While promotions are an important means to stimulate purchasing motivation, it's not enough. We also need to further stimulate their desire to buy at the psychological level. Go on. We should first segment the market. Those who can afford luxury brands are definitely high-end individuals, but within this group, there are differences in professions and wealth. Fang Yuan nodded and said, yes, luxury brands are mainly purchased by women, who are either elite professionals, wealthy daughters, or mistresses being financially supported. I interjected for Fang Yuan. After years in the retail industry, we had developed a detailed classification system for our target consumer groups. Ironically, we had once studied the consumption structure of luxury brands at Brilliant Department Store. About 20% were company executives, 30% were second-generation wealthy, and the remaining 50% were mostly irregular purchasers. Hence, it was common to see young, beautiful women accompanied by successful-looking men entering luxury brand stores. Of course, this was just an internal survey we conducted, lacking official authority, but it was sufficient to illustrate the point. So, are you planning to use this as an entry point? Fang Yuan asked incisively. I nodded and said, exactly. You know these women. They often lack a sense of security in relationships and need a form of solace, even if it's illusory. They would find comfort in it. So, what's your promotional theme? Love is not extravagant. During the event, we'll provide the usual discounts, and as long as couples make purchases at luxury brand stores with their partners, we'll give them a commemorative version of our department store's membership card. In the following year's event, if these couples still shop together at our department store for luxury items, we'll rebate them cash into their commemorative membership card. Initially, it'll be 10%, increasing to 15% in the second year, and 20% in the fourth year. This not only enhances the continuity of consumption but also provides these consumers with both psychological and material compensation. In truth, those women aren't really concerned about the so-called cashback. What they care about is psychological comfort and the hope for lasting love. Fang Yuan pondered the feasibility of this idea in silence for a while before saying to me, I basically approve of this promotional strategy, but whether it can be implemented, we need to have another meeting for collective discussion. I nodded and said, all right, I'll defer to your arrangement. Fang Yuan joked, Zhao Yang, it seems you have quite an understanding of women's minds. If your judgment about those women is correct, then this counter-strategy against Zhuomei's promotional tactics will surely be a great success. I remained silent, but my understanding of those women had been gained through years of nightclub experiences. As for whether their psychological characteristics could be used as a basis for business actions, I wasn't sure yet. If fortunate enough to be adopted by the company, the market would ultimately validate it. After a busy day, finally, it was time to leave work. Colleagues in the office had gradually left, and the surroundings quietened. I leaned back in my office chair, closed my eyes to rest, but my mind remained restless once again. A ringing phone brought me back to reality. I rubbed my face heavily before picking up the phone from the table. Upon seeing the number, I was surprised to find it was Dad calling. It had been me calling him for years since I left home, and he rarely contacted me. Sometimes I wondered if he had forgotten about his wandering son. In reality, though, I knew he hadn't forgotten, hence, whenever he traveled past Suzhou, he would come to see me. It's just that he wasn't very good at expressing emotions. As a habit, I lit a cigarette before answering the call and greeted, "Dad." Have you eaten yet?" "Not off work yet. The company has been busy lately." "Oh. Do you have something to tell me?" "I haven't had time to go to Suzhou recently. The rice and flour we talked about last time have been sent to you by express delivery. Please pay attention to receiving them in the next few days." "Oh." I responded listlessly. Dad fell silent for a moment but didn't mention hanging up the phone. His unusual demeanor surprised me, but I remained patient, waiting for him to continue. "Zhao Yang, how are things with that girl?" I knew Dad was referring to Mikai, but I pretended not to understand and asked, "Which girl?" "The girl you live with. By the way, your mom knitted 2 scarves this time, and she also knitted one for her. Give it to her when you get the chance. Also, you have a bad temper. Don't lose your temper with her. Accommodate her a bit. Don't argue when living together." As Dad spoke, I counted how many words he said in my mind. To my surprise, he had spoken a total of 64 words in this sentence alone. It seemed like he had never spoken so many words in one go ever since I consciously started counting. Suddenly, I felt that the world was truly unpredictable. Even Dad had changed, becoming more talkative. "You don't even know her name, yet you're so enthusiastic in knitting scarves for her. Do you think it's appropriate?" I said somewhat bemusedly. Dad followed up with a sentence that made me want to facepalm. "Since you're living with her, do we need to know her name for?" After a moment, I helplessly said to Dad, "You're right. I'll follow your instructions. Be good to her. She's a good girl." Dad's repeated emphasis left me helpless. But I dared not disrespect him, so I reluctantly hung up the phone after his instruction. Then, I helplessly said to myself, my own dad, he's only met her twice. How does he know if she's a good girl or not? Is she really pure, or is he just calculating? Dad ignored my banter and repeated, "Be good to her," before hanging up. Listening to the dial tone, I didn't know what to feel. I couldn't help but ask myself, how should I be good to her? Right now, I felt like a helpless bystander watching as her uncle, Mi Zhongde, raised a cruel knife to strike at her. Putting the phone back on the table, I leaned heavily back in my chair, slapped my face with my hand, closed my eyes, and remembered her lonely figure with her long hair hanging down. It felt like a blood vessel connected to my heart had been torn, and in an instant, a suffocating feeling of pain surged over me. The phone rang again. This time it was Mikai calling. It dawned on me that she had promised this morning to help me move. She should have finished work by now, hence her proactive contact. She was indeed a woman of her word. Chapter 57, Embracing Selfhood. I hesitated for quite a while before finally answering Mia's call. Her voice seemed somewhat subdued, as if accustomed to being lowered. She inquired, "Have you finished work?" "Yes, have you not finished yet?" "I am also about to finish." "Oh, where is your company located?" "I'll come pick you. UPI helped you move today, and I feel relieved to have accomplished that task." I chuckled and replied, "Your eagerness to assist me in moving is perhaps to prevent me from further pestering you, isn't it?" Pestering is a well-chosen word. "You haven't answered my question about where your company is yet." I paused before answering, "I'll come to Zuomei to find you. The rice noodles downstairs at Zuomei are quite good. Today, my treat, as a token of gratitude for your hard work in helping me move." "All right, then come over. I'll wait for you at the entrance of the rice noodle shop." I acknowledged Mia with a word, and then we both hung up. I briefly composed myself and left the office, carrying my backpack. Arriving at the north gate of Zuomei Shopping Center, Mia was already standing at the entrance of the rice noodle shop, awaiting me. Today, she wore no makeup, yet remained as captivating as ever. At this peak shopping hour, waves of people passed by, almost instinctively casting their gazes toward her, drawn by her beauty. After all, in this day and age, completely natural beauties like her, without any makeup, were truly rare. However, I was a man who didn't quite appreciate her beauty. Since the first day we met, I had felt that her beauty had nothing to do with me. What I had always cared about was whether she would let me stay in that house. But in the end, I still moved out. If one were to stretch it a bit, my moving out of that house could be seen as a compromise with reality. Although I had lived in that house for over 2 years, while Mia hadn't even stayed for a month, because her name was on the property deed, in the end, it was still me who moved out. This had nothing to do with the length of time or the depth of feelings, it was simply a compromise under the pressure of reality. Perhaps I was indeed quite idealistic, which led me to use the length of time living in the house as a criterion and impose the identity of a tenant on Mia. I didn't even think there was anything wrong with doing so, it was only natural. But now it seemed that I was the tenant after all, or I couldn't even be considered a tenant. At least Mia, the one with the property deed, had never agreed for me to rent that house. I stood before Mia, and we both silently gazed at each other, as if lacking a topic for conversation without any verbal sparring. Finally, I asked her, "How long have you been waiting?" "Not long." "Let's go, there's hardly any space left inside," Mia said, glancing behind her. I nodded and walked towards the rice noodle shop ahead of Mia. For the first time, I gallantly held open the glass door for her. Mia looked somewhat surprised at me but politely said, "Thank you," before entering the shop. Mia found an empty seat, and I went to place our order. After waiting in line for quite some time, I ordered 2 bowls of rice noodles and some other snacks. Then, holding the receipt and the waiting card, I sat down opposite Mia. We had been eating at this rice noodle shop for 2 consecutive days. I couldn't help but ask Mia, who was seated across from me, rather boredly, "Is the reason you like eating rice noodles because your name is Mia?" Mia glanced at me but didn't respond. Instead, she lifted the teacup in front of her and took a sip of water, evidently unwilling to entertain my mundane question. I smiled and didn't mind, as I had grown accustomed to her indifferent attitude towards me. Although occasionally, we could pass as ordinary friends. After a while, the ordered items were brought over by the waiter. Mia only asked for a bowl of rice noodles, pushing all the other snacks towards me. I pushed the chicken legs and tofu towards her, saying, "You'll need the energy to help me move later. You should eat more. I'm only responsible for driving. Besides, do you have a lot of stuff? Last time when you moved out, I saw you dragging everything by yourself and left in one go." I recalled the scene of fleeing due to lack of money and leaving Mia stranded. I smiled awkwardly and said, "I'm just trying to give you an excuse to eat more, and then let your mouth ruin your beauty. Let's see what you'll look like after gaining weight. You're really wicked. But unfortunately for you, I don't gain weight." Seeing Mia's slightly proud expression as she claimed she doesn't gain weight, I smiled genuinely from the heart. Although she often appeared indifferent, there was still innocence within her. Her inadvertent display of innocence in front of me precisely indicated that she no longer harbored any defenses against me. Perhaps all the conflicts and unhappiness between us were truly because of that house. After finishing our meal, Mia and I went to my new place. I didn't have much stuff, and originally, I asked her to wait downstairs, but she insisted on coming up with me. She helped me carry a few lighter bags. In fact, she had the same habit of saying one thing but meaning another, as most women do. Just now at the rice noodle shop, she had told me, "I'm only responsible for driving, not moving." But such double talk only proved further that she was a kind woman. So, with only a couple of encounters, I quickly judged her to be a good girl. Arriving at the new house, I quickly tidied up the room while Mia simultaneously helped me arrange the bedding. This made me feel guilty. I remembered how shortly after our first meeting, I rudely threw all her blankets downstairs. Back then, although it was out of frustration, comparing our behaviors, I suddenly felt inferior. After tidying up a bit, despite feeling exhausted, I went downstairs to the beverage shop and bought 2 cups of hot fruit juice. I gave one to Mia and brought over a chair for her to rest. She seemed suspicious, wondering if I was planning to sweet-talk her again, then backtrack and ask her to move back into that house. In reality, she misunderstood. I was only reproaching myself for my past rudeness and now for hiding things from her. Mia only drank half of her juice. She placed the cup on the coffee table and said to me with a sense of relief, "Your matters are also settled, I should go." "Oh, take your time on the way." Mia responded and had already picked up her handbag. I opened the door for her and said, "If there's anything you can't handle on your own over there, feel free to call me anytime. I'll be there." Mia nodded, turned her body, and walked towards the door. I added, "If you ever want some home-cooked meals, come over here. I'll cook for you. Besides, it's close to your company." "I got it." Mia didn't turn back, but her tone was less indifferent. I understood her. It was not just to brush me off. Maybe one night, she would actually come over for a meal cooked by me: porridge, rice, and a few simple home-cooked dishes. Mia was getting farther and farther away. Watching her back, I felt a mix of emotions again. Perhaps Wei Zhong was soon to implement his power conspiracy. If I continued to hide it, even if I later told Mia, there wouldn't be much time left for her to deal with it. Mia had already entered the elevator and disappeared from my sight. The words of the master flashed suddenly in my mind, urging me to treat her well. I endured another bout of painful agony. In this relentless torment, I finally felt fed up. I gritted my teeth and said to myself, I will be myself, the scum in others' eyes, but with principles, with my own steadfastness. Chapter 58, The 2 Letters I Wrote. It was the first night I spent in this bachelor apartment, yet I made one of the most significant decisions of my life. I wrote 2 letters, one intended for Mia tomorrow, and the other, a resignation letter for Chen Jingming. After completing this promotional plan, I knew that by choosing to expose Mia Zhengda's power conspiracy to Mia, I would also betray the trust of Fang Yuan and especially Chen Jingming. I had no face to continue staying at Baoli department store. Resigning was the only path I could choose. Taking a deep breath, I picked up the pen and scarcely pondered, quickly penning down the 2 letters. Then, I snapped the pen in half and tossed it into the wastebasket. The pen was innocent, but my emotions needed an outlet. I destroyed my own future with my own hands, and even the futures of Fang Yuan and Chen Jingming. Recalling the sacrifices Lai Yao made for my career prospects, I felt a choking sensation in my heart. Although this decision upheld the belief deep within me, it betrayed the friends who genuinely cared about me. I folded the 2 letters and tucked them into my pocket. Although I didn't regret my choice, I knew the night ahead would be sleepless. I wanted to drink, the more, the better, then collapse into bed, burying my head and ignoring the burdens of reality. I hailed a cab to CC's restaurant. At this moment, I truly needed a drink. If CC was available, I also wanted to chat with her, not necessarily about my existential choices, just some casual conversation. It was late, nearing closing time. There were very few customers left in the empty city music restaurant. CC sat in a corner, drinking beer, still not living like a woman despite her beautiful appearance. I sat opposite her, and only then did CC realize my presence. She signaled to the waiter, who promptly brought me a large glass of draft beer. CC looked at me and smiled, teasingly asking, "What's wrong, Zhao Yang? Did life beat you up again?" "Pretty much. You seem to know me quite well," I said, lifting the glass of beer and taking a big gulp. "Otherwise, why would you come to me so late?" I remained silent, drinking the beer as if it were water, until the cold sting of alcohol in my head stopped. Meg just watched me, occasionally taking a few sips of beer herself, until I stopped. Then she asked me, "So, what's bothering you about life this time?" I remained silent for a long time before saying, "You said we're both idealists, right? It's a beautiful thing to live with ideals and convictions, yet why does reality insist on throwing so many obstacles our way?" Cece thought for a moment before saying to me, "Actually, over the years, I've come to realize one thing. Living with idealism is fine, but you need material support. Take this music restaurant of mine, it now supports me. I don't have to worry too much about material things, so I can continue living this idealized life. If it weren't for that nameless customer providing 100,000 yuan in support during a life and death situation for the restaurant, allowing it to continue operating, where would I talk about ideals?" I remained silent for a long time again before saying, "Cece, you're right. Living idealistically also requires material support." Cece was indeed correct. Taking the events I encountered as an example, if I had enough financial security as a guarantee, without worrying about career prospects, and Fang Yuan and Chen Jingming were already in high positions at Baoli, then I could have informed Mia of everything without any worries, fulfilling my conscience and beliefs. Even though I understood that living with idealism required material support, I still didn't intend to change my decision. I would still inform Mia Zhengda of the power conspiracy. Perhaps deep down, even if this caused me to lose the hard-won career prospects, I still felt it was worth it. After downing a large glass of draft beer, I ordered another one, while Cece just smoked and kept me company. There was no further communication between us. This lack of communication stemmed from our idealistic perspective on the world, seeing through it and feeling too tired to say anything more. With 2 large glasses of draft beer in my stomach, I began to feel dizzy. The tension in my emotions gradually relaxed, to the point where even Cece's face became blurry. Seizing the moment, I ordered a glass of high-proof liquor and drank it all in one go. This drunken indulgence, with blurred vision, made my dizziness intensify. Eventually, I collapsed on the table in front of CC. My spiritual world may have quieted, but tomorrow's reality would likely be in chaos once again. The next day, awakening from the headache of a hangover, I found the window shrouded in autumn rain. The sky was gloomy. Glancing around the room, I realized I was sleeping in Cece's boudoir. Remembering how deliberately I got myself drunk last night throwing off the covers, slipping on my shoes, I left the bed and stepped out of the bedroom. Cece was still asleep on the sofa in the living room, undisturbed. Checking the time, it was already 7:30, so I quietly closed the door behind me and left. Descending the stairs, I hailed a taxi outside the residential area. However, my destination wasn't my office but Joamay. Since I had made my decision last night, I would adhere to it. 20 minutes later, I arrived at the entrance to Joamay's underground parking lot, waiting for Mia. Knowing her habits, she probably hadn't arrived at the office yet. After waiting for about 20 minutes more, I finally spotted Mia's red Q7. Seizing the moment when she parked the car in the underground parking space, I flagged down a passing student-looking guy. Addressing the puzzled young man, I said, "Hey buddy, could you do me a favor?" The young man looked wary and asked, "What favor?" I pulled out the letters from my pocket and handed them to him, saying, "Could you deliver a letter for me to a girl?" The young man suddenly understood and remarked, "Is this a love letter?" But with technology so advanced nowadays, why write a love letter? You could just send a text message or something. You're from the 90s, right? Yeah. I'm from the 80s. Do you know what a generation gap is? We used to write love letters back in our day. It's called style. Hurry up and give this to her, she's about to take the elevator. I urged him impatiently. But I'll be late for school. It'll only take a moment. It won't delay your schooling. The young man still looked hesitant. I immediately changed tactics and asked, "Do you like looking at beautiful women?" Upon hearing about a beautiful woman, the young man's interest was piqued, and he eagerly asked, "Is she beautiful? If she weren't beautiful, would I be interested in her?" "Don't worry, she's absolutely gorgeous when you get off the elevator. Wait for her in the underground parking lot. She'll be wearing a purple-gray coat, with long hair cascading down. She's the most beautiful woman there. Make sure not to mistake her for anyone else." "Okay, I'll see if she's as beautiful as you say." The young man finally took the letter from me. I instructed him again, "Just deliver the letter to her, and don't say anything else, especially don't describe my appearance in front of her, got it?" The young man nodded knowingly and said, "I get it. You want to surprise her. I wish you success in your confession." I nodded in approval and said, "Well said. Maybe we don't have such a generation gap after all." The young man chuckled and dashed toward the elevator entrance in the mall as I lit a cigarette. I watched him go, feeling as if I had finally set down a heavy burden. As for tomorrow, well, tomorrow would take care of itself. Chapter 59, Delivering the Letter to Micah. Moments later, the young man returned, his excitement barely concealed as he exclaimed to me, "You didn't deceive me. She truly is a stunning beauty." I smiled and replied, "Describe her appearance as you mentioned, with her long hair cascading down, clad in purplish-gray attire. Indeed, exceptionally beautiful, though not very inclined to engage with others." Nevertheless, I did pass the letter to her. Nodding, I jestingly inquired, "Do you think I stand a chance with her?" The young man earnestly assessed me and replied, "I find it doubtful." "Indeed. Hurry off to school now, lest you be late." I chuckled, giving his shoulder a pat. After leaving behind a wish of good luck, the young man hastily made his way to the distant platform amidst the drizzling autumn rain. I adjusted my shoulder bag, gazing up at the colossal billboard of Zomei Shopping Center, silently wishing Micah a safe passage through this crisis. All I could do for her now was this. Returning to Bali department store, I remained calm, carrying out my duties tranquilly, participating in the exchange conference organized by Fang Yuan, calmly communicating with colleagues. My tranquility stemmed from having foreseen my outcome. Thus, I was adequately prepared mentally for everything. After the conclusion of this promotional plan, I would resign from Boli. Perhaps I would continue seeking employment in Suzhou, or perhaps return to my birth city, letting my uncle arrange a job for me at their workplace, leading a peaceful life thereafter. Engrossed in work, time flew swiftly, and soon it was time to leave. I brewed a cup of coffee in the lounge, briefly relaxing before diving back into work today. Fang Yuan had already informed Chen Jingming about the love is not extravagant promotional theme I proposed yesterday, which was officially approved by Chen Jingming. Consequently, the process was set in motion promptly. As I was the originator of this theme, I would be the main author of this promotional plan. As a gesture of gratitude for Chen Jingming's years of care, I must put in 120% effort into this plan. When I left the company at the end of the day, it was already 10 o'clock in the evening. Feeling famished, I bought some hamburgers and the like from the KFC store downstairs. Walking along the street, munching on food, after a day of fatigue, I needed this quasi-walk to relax myself. However, true relaxation eluded me. Amidst the hustle and bustle of the street, what stood out starkly was my solitude and helplessness in this city. I yearned to have a home in this city, a girlfriend who could eventually become my wife, yet, after struggling for these years, I realized how powerless I was against these small aspirations. I understood how insignificant I was in this vast city, so insignificant that a gust of wind could easily sway me, leaving behind nothing but reluctance and desolation, drifting away from this city with the wind. Returning to the bachelor apartment I had rented only yesterday, I felt the capriciousness of life. I had thought I would live here for a long time, but after handing that letter to Micah this morning, I had already decided not to stay here for too long. Although subconsciously, I still wanted to struggle to survive in this city, finding a new job wasn't that easy. It all depended on luck after resigning. If I could find a job quickly, I would continue to strive. If not, reluctantly, I would have to leave. After freshening up and lying in bed, my thoughts were chaotic. I dared not plan my future. Thus, the lofty life force I had a few days ago regressed into a decadent acceptance of the status quo. Listening to the rain outside the window, I started to think of Jianwei again, reminiscing about the future we once envisioned together. However, now, such thoughts seemed pallid and feeble, and I alone bore the weight of this pallor and feebleness. At least without me, Jianwei would still lead a good life. She wouldn't worry about material matters, she could use material possessions to fill the void of emotions. In fact, her emotions wouldn't be void anymore, she had found solace in Xiang Chen. This was good, truly good. I would continue to carry my pain silently and offer my blessings to her. Taking out the guitar from its case, I strummed its strings, singing Chen Yishuan's Backpack. I sang along with the melody the guitar produced, singing until tears welled up inexplicably. For someone like me, without a house, without a job, without a woman, these were trivial matters. Yet, I shed cheap tears for these trivial matters. I assent this inexplicable enough? The rain outside the window seemed to intensify. After this rain passes, the sky will probably turn colder again, and winter will arrive, blanketing this world in frost. Time progressed steadily for 3 days. During these 3 days, there were both minor and major events. Minor events included receiving 2 knitted scarves and some rice and flour sent by my uncle. Major events included efficiently completing the promotional plan themed Love is Not Extravagant amidst relentless overtime work. I handed over the completed plan to Fang Yuan, who then passed it on to Chen Jingming. With the submission of the plan, the countdown to the day I would hand in my resignation letter to Chen Jingming began, marking my departure from Bully Department Store. On this evening after work, I decided to call Micah, intending to give her the knitted scarf as a gift. I believed she would appreciate it, given that she had worn one of the knitted sweaters my uncle sent last time on several occasions. Thus, she should also like this knitted scarf. Regardless of our relationship, this knitted scarf represented the thoughtfulness of my parents and my uncle, so it was only right to give it. With ample justification, I immediately dialed Micah's number. However, no one answered for a long time. Just as I was about to give up, she returned the call. I hurriedly answered the phone, and she apologized, saying, "Sorry, I was in a meeting." "Do you need something?" Instead of responding immediately, I cautiously asked, "Is your company busy lately?" "Yes, there's been some trouble in the company, and we're dealing with it." "Ah," I responded, knowing that Micah had probably received my letter and might be dealing with Michael's plot against her rights. Micah urged me, "So, what's up? Why did you call?" I hesitated for a moment before saying, "My mom knitted a scarf for you, and my dad had it delivered. If you're free, you can pick it up, or I can bring it to you." After a pause, I added, "If you don't want it, that's okay too." Micah didn't refuse. She said, "Then wait a moment. I have some things to take care of. Come to Zomiai when you have time. Let's find a place to have a drink. I'll come to you after I'm done." I somewhat tactlessly said, "Then you have to treat me to the drink." I'm coming over to give you something, after all. Sure, Micah agreed before hanging up, seeming quite busy at the moment. After ending the call, I packed the scarf into a bag and left the company, heading towards Zomei shopping center across the street.